Episode of the podcast back in July 2021, we talked about one of my favorite films, Kiss Me Deadly. Kiss Me Deadly was one of those strange golden age films where you have to marvel that it even got made. Robert Aldrich and A.I. Bezarides wrote a screenplay that parodied the original Mickey Spillane novel. Mickey Spillane was a far-right cold warrior whose racism, misogyny, homophobia, and reactionary views spilled out onto the page. The king of a kind of hyper-masculine, ultraviolet, reactionary pulp crime novel. Aldrich and Bezarides' satirical treatment of Mickey Spillane's hyper-masculine, violent private eye, Mike Hammer, a radical departure even from the Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe types in Spillane's dark reactionary world.
Drop the knife! Drop the knife! Drop the knife!
Placed Ralph Meeker as Mike Hammer in an atomic age noir film where, as an ultra-violent, misogynistic relic of American anger and brutality, he ends up bumbling through a convoluted plot and finally staggering across a Malibu beach as an atomic bomb goes off in the beach house behind him. Mickey Spillane was so enraged by the film that he ended up trying to make his own Mike Hammer film, where he played Mike Hammer in a low-budget, deeply unsuccessful adaptation of The Girl Hunters. Spillane's politics were completely antithetical to A.I. Bezarides and Robert Aldrich. A.I. Bezarides was a known leftist, an Armenian-American novelist and screenwriter who had been born in Turkey. He was blacklisted in the 1950s during the time when he was adapting Kiss Me Deadly with Robert Aldrich. Aldrich came from the Rockefeller clan and was an heir to the Chase Bank fortune, and his enormously wealthy father ran one of the most powerful newspapers in Rhode Island and was Nelson Rockefeller's cousin. Originally, Robert Aldrich was bound to go into finance, majoring in economics at the University of Virginia. But while he was in college, the Great Depression happened, and Aldrich began to question his family's right-wing politics and the power they wielded. Aldrich dropped out of college to become a production clerk at RKO for $25 a week, a decision that so angered his parents that he was permanently cut off from the Aldrich fortune and written out of the will. It was written that no American director was ever born as wealthy as Robert Aldrich and then so thoroughly cut off from family money. He worked his way up the production ladder as assistant director to Charlie Chaplin for Limelight, Jean Renoir for The Southerner, and Joseph Lucy's The Prowler, as well as working with William Wellman, who would go on to direct A Star Is Born, on the story of G.I. Joe. As a film director, Robert Aldrich pushed the acceptable boundaries during the production code. His films were often noir films, war films, and westerns, genres he used to both push the level of acceptable violence under the Hays Code, but also to rework and subvert common film tropes in action films. Aldrich had a style of his own, which was noticed by Truffaut and Jean-Luc Godard, and the other director critics of what would become the French New Wave. His impact on Godard was so profound that one of the most iconic images in Breathless has Jean-Paul Belmondo standing in front of a poster for Robert Aldrich's 10 Seconds to Hell. Robert Aldrich was one of the earliest American directors to be granted the coveted title auteur by the French New Wave critics. Tonight we're talking about one of Robert Aldrich's most famous and controversial films, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. It's far more popular in Europe in the 1950s than McCarthy-era America. And as the mid-1950s and early 1960s came around, it was increasingly hard for him to fund his projects. Aldrich needed a comeback, and he got it with Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, as did the film's two stars, Joan Crawford and Bette Davis. Joan Crawford was good friends with Robert Aldrich. They had worked together in 1956 on the psychological drama Autumn Leaves, and they wanted to keep working together, with a whole bunch of ideas being bounced back and forth. One of the ideas that both Crawford and Aldrich had agreed to was that a movie would star both Crawford and her bête noire, Bette Davis. But for a few years, they couldn't find a suitable project, and the funding just wasn't there. Until in 1960, Henry Farrell released his gothic psychological horror novel, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, the story of two sisters, Jane and Blanche Hudson, vaudeville stars turned film actresses, who are now aging spinsters living together in an LA mansion. Jane, a former child star, is an alcoholic in mental decline, and her sister Blanche, the more famous movie actress, asking her to star with her in the film adaptation in 1961. Bette Davis, who didn't know Aldrich, said she needed to meet him, asking only two questions. Are you sleeping with Joan Crawford, and will I get to play Jane? With the answers no and yes, she agreed to star in the movie. It was surprising that Joan Crawford and Bette Davis agreed to star together. Their feud is now legendary and probably the most famous in Hollywood's golden age. But the golden age was over, and Crawford and Davis's stars had both faded after they both left Warner Brothers.
Friends.
2 decades earlier, they were two of Warner Brothers' biggest stars, and their dressing rooms were right next door to each other. Both known for their relationships and affairs, their interests had constantly coincided with everyone from Clark Gable to Crawford's ex-husband, Franchot Tone. A huge publicity campaign for Davis's movie, The Ex-Lady, the first to have Bette Davis's name above the title, was drowned completely by Joan Crawford announcing her divorce from Douglas Fairbanks. When Bette Davis unexpectedly won her first Oscar, Joan mockingly called her dress a frock. Joan Crawford's big Oscar win for Mildred Pierce came after Bette Davis turned down the role. Bette Davis publicly mocked Joan Crawford's peace overtures as being the result of a lesbian crush. And then, when Crawford's friend Catherine Albert got into a fight with her and had a falling out, Catherine vindictively wrote the screenplay The Star about a middle-aged actress who refuses to quit, and Bette Davis signed on to play the pathetic Joan Crawford stand-in.
Come on, Oscar. Let you and me get drunk.
A decade after The Star, Crawford and Davis starred in their one and only film together, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and the feud literally exploded on set. As the Hudson Sisters, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is a film about the jealousy between two middle-aged actresses whose stars are fading. Baby Jane Hudson was a famous child vaudeville act. Her doting father was her manager. Left in the background, they pay no attention to Blanche, Jane's older sister. However, after their parents die, Jane and Blanche transition to Hollywood, where Blanche upstages her once dominant younger sister, becoming a huge starlet. Jane is stuck as an adult child star, spoiled, vindictive, and now a raging alcoholic. One night after a party, a car accident leaves Blanche paralyzed and in a wheelchair. The two sisters fade into obscurity, living in an LA mansion together, where Jane must take care of Blanche. However, decades of alcohol abuse have taken their toll on Jane's already fragile mind. What ensues is a psychological horror movie. And on set, what ensued was essentially also a similar type of psychological horror movie. Some deeply insane and petty fighting, including Bette Davis buying a Coca-Cola machine for the set because Joan Crawford was sitting on the board of Pepsi. Maybe even wearing a lead weightlifting belt, so Bette Davis would wrench her back trying to drag her, and then coughing to ruin the take, so she'd have to do it again and again. Crawford and Davis both called Robert Aldrich every night to complain about each other. However, the results of their feuding, the hatred, the on-screen tension is amazing. You can feel it radiating from the screen, sucking you into it. Baby Jane feeds her sister both her pet bird and a rat, and somehow it doesn't feel off-brand for the actual set. Robert Aldrich has an intrinsic understanding of how the modern 1960s LA fashion and culture clashes so hard with this moth-bitten vaudevillian early 20th century style, becoming deeply unsettling. The film also introduced the actor Victor Buono as the scheming con man piano player Edwin Flagg. Tying this all together, back to the beginning, both Wesley Addy and Maxine Cooper, who starred in Kiss Me Deadly, make appearances in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Before I introduce the panel, please like this video and subscribe to the Movie Night Extravaganza YouTube channel. Hit that bell to get notified whenever we're streaming. Also, we are now monetized, so if you have any pressing questions during this live stream, send us a super chat. which helps me keep the show running, and which I am obligated by international law, human rights law, to answer. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/movie night extra. All of our after parties are on there forever. We also have a new Discord and a Letterboxd HQ account, so those are 2 more places to follow along with us. Links are in the description. Okay, let me introduce the panel. Kristina Oakes is streaming on Twitch at Cosmopolitics, twitch.tv/Cosmopolitics. Also recently joined YouTube, she's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Cosmopolitics. Send her some subs on Twitch, and send her a coffee. Katie Baldassaro is the co-host of Movie Night Extravaganza, a director, writer, and actress who wrote and co-directed Girl in the Basement, along with appearing in horror movies like The Purge Election Year and The Devil's Nightmare. You can catch her voice acting in the podcast series, The Starwell Foundation, and she's the host of What If I Don't Like It, and on TikTok at Movie Runtime. I, of course, am your host, who's a child star that you definitely recognize, Baby Forrest Miller. Who the hell is Baby Jane Hudson? Kristina, I should have added to your intro. I should have added like professor of feudology at the Hollywood University or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, especially considering I might have killed Olivia de Havilland. Like, yeah, she was 103, but like when Regis Philbin died, I was like, we still got Olivia de Havilland. And then the next day announced that she died, and I was like, fuck, she could have made it to 104.
We keep killing celebrities by like mentioning celebrities.
We killed the queen. I killed the queen. I was like, she's gonna die tomorrow. She did.
By the way, I saw the other day, it's been like the 1 year anniversary, and I wrote I killed the queen, which was like, no, it was you, but somehow I took credit for it on my Facebook. So I was like, they're not gonna know. They don't know who Kristina is. Yeah, I killed Gilbert Gottfried because I said, well, every time a comedian died, there's like a bunch of comedians that died, and I was like, and every single time there was like a picture of them with Gilbert Gottfried, and I was like, you're next, Gilbert Gottfried. And then one day they're like, Gilbert Gottfried is dead, and I was like, oh fuck, I did this, didn't I?
Harry was just saying this morning, one of his prized possessions is a signed photo from Gilbert Gottfried.
Well, now he's not gonna come on.
The week that he died, don't tell him you killed him.
But Kristina, what did I miss in the Joan Crawford, Bette Davis feud explanation? Because I know there's stuff that I missed, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, to really go back in the beginning, Joan Crawford became well known in silent films. She used to be Norma Shear's body double. They had a feud as well. By the time Talkies came, she was playing shop girls. She was known for her rags to riches films. By the early 30s, Bette Davis came along and always had an iffy relationship with Jack Warner.
But they seem so happy, the 3 of them in that picture that I found.
Yeah. But what was interesting is that I think the first time they saw each other was at one of the with the whole situation involving like her first like major role, which didn't do so well because of the announcement of her divorce from Douglas Fairbanks Jr., who ironically Douglas Fairbanks Sr.'s wife, Mary Pickford, Canadian, wasn't so fond of Joan Crawford because of Joan Crawford's poor upbringings.
Yeah,
What
so
was
the
her
thing.
poor upbringing?
Well, Joan Crawford, named Lucille Lasser, her and her brother came from like nowhere. I think they grew up in like Texas, I believe. She had to work as a child at a very young age. Apparently one of her jobs was putting stuff on wire hangers, clothes on wire hangers, for those who know that situation. That's why Joan Crawford was always driven to work and be a completely different person, because she had a very painful childhood. Her mother wasn't really around. Her mother was always marrying and divorcing men. I think it's very different from Bette Davis's upbringing, if I'm not mistaken. So Joan Crawford really, tried to, the childhood that she had to work hard, which is why a lot of people assume she put a lot of pressure on Kristina and her kids to grow up fast and know things. Mm-hmm. But according to Hollywood lore, Bette Davis coined the nickname Oscar because she was married to a man named Oscar at the time.
Oh, snap!
Yep.
Yeah,
she takes credit for it.
I'm trying to remember which clip it was. I have a clip where she's talking about yeah.
Yeah.
I'll try to find that while you're
Well,
explaining.
while you're finding that, I want to point something out. It's funny that you mentioned the thing with oh god, the senior. What was the
Douglas Fairbanks Sr.
Yeah, because I noticed when they were watching clips, so there's a part in this movie where they're watching clips of the actresses younger, so why not just use clips of both of those actresses younger?
Yep.
And one of them is a clip from a movie, looked into it. It is a movie where Bette Davis stars opposite Joan Crawford's ex-husband, almost as if to be like, did you guys put that in there to kind of like push the beast a little, you know?
Yeah, because especially considering Joan Crawford and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. starred in one of the Our Dancing Daughters movies that kind of put Joan Crawford, up more because it was a very successful like trilogy of films, Our Dancing Daughters, Our Maidens, and stuff like that. So
Crazy.
yeah, it's crazy. And another thing too is that I feel like the feud just only got worse as time went on. Like Joan Crawford, I think Bette Davis viewed herself as the actress and Joan Crawford as the movie star, which kind of does make sense because Joan Crawford is the pinnacle of like glamour in Hollywood. She always kept up with the times of fashion. She always tried to look great, look her appearance, look as young as she could. If she looked terrible, she would go into hiding, which is what she did when she got older in the 70s. And so, but Bette Davis was known for playing these like sardonic, witty, spunky, bitchy women, which was not what Joan Crawford was doing.
Yeah.
She was playing like someone spunky, redefined women. And so that's why they always got like the comparisons, because they were both like the epitome of what a woman in Hollywood was supposed to be.
Which you can even hear like the difference between the two like actresses things in the way that Bette Davis does the impression in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane when she gets on the phone, like, hello, like that, and she did that voice for the entirety of the movie The Star, and almost won that literally written by two friends of Joan Crawford's who had just had their own feud with her and decided, all right, we've had enough of Joan Crawford. So Catherine Albert and her director husband, they penned like an entire screenplay making fun of the alcohol-driven middle-aged Joan Crawford stand-in, and then had Bette Davis play her, and then she got nominated for an Oscar. I don't think she won in the end, but she got nominated for an Oscar for that performance.
But it was a bomb at the box office because Joan Crawford got her revenge. Those two have a daughter, right? Those two that wrote the screenplay, her ex-friends have a daughter who's 17 and wanted to get married. So Joan Crawford's like, we'll have the wedding at my place. And I'll bring your parents over. And it'll be a lovely time. Oh, were they pissed? Joan Crawford, in the end, always somehow got like the last laugh somehow.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see that even in the way
Seriously?
that, I mean, go ahead, KT.
Oh, I was gonna say we're talking about the Oscar situation that happened with that other film, but you guys know what happened with this film where Bette Davis and Harry Bette Davis gets nominated for this. Joan doesn't, but Joan does that whole campaign telling everyone else, don't vote for Betty, and you don't even have to go to the Oscars. I'll accept for you. Bancroft wins for the
Miracle
Helen
Worker.
Keller movie, The Miracle Worker. And then as she's walking past Bette Davis, she goes, excuse me, I have to go get my Oscar. What a bunt.
She was also like, step aside. She
Yeah.
told that to Betty. She was like, step aside. And I was like, oh, this is why I love Joan Crawford, because she could be that bitch.
There's these pictures of her just hamming it up at the Oscars.
Who are you guys? Are you Team Crawford or Team?
I'm Team Crawford. I always was a Joan Crawford fan from a little. You'd be amazed how many women don't like Bette Davis because they're like, she's a bitch. I'm like, it's not that she's a bitch, it's that you could tell she didn't really adapt like the transatlantic accent. Like when she spoke, she always spoke very abrasive like this. She didn't have a refined voice like Joan Crawford did, or any of those actors who translated from silent films to talkies.
And she could clearly do it. She could clearly do that accent.
Yeah, she could do the accent when she was doing her roles, or she was doing like a Southern Belle type of character, like in that movie that was shown in What Happened to Baby Jane that apparently sucked.
Yeah. Well, so I want to go back.
The director did say he had to go back 30 years to find that movie, to find a movie where she sucked.
Yeah.
I mean, she's an amazing actor. By this point, she absolutely kills it. But there's like going back to like kind of the beginning of this feud, the first movie that she was in, she got her name on the marquee. Like that same day, Joan Crawford was like, "Oh, that's when she decided, like, or announced that she was divorcing Douglas Fairbanks." So basically, it went from, you know, because all of the studios colluded with the papers at the time, and they would kind of decide where all of these different news items went. So it went from a top like Bette Davis stars in the first movie headline that was supposed to go into the paper to literally she was relegated to a tiny little fucking paragraph at the end of like the Hollywood news column, and Joan Crawford took up the entire page. And you can still somewhere out there you can like find the actual like you know, like I found it when I was doing the thing and I put it in front of her face. But
do you guys know what day Joan Crawford and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. got married?
Nope, I do not know that.
October 11th, baby.
Well, you're there, you know, it was a little bit late, but you know, finally.
I'm a soul child of some sort.
This is the clip that I found though on a BBC documentary where they went through about the Oscars, but this is they went through all of their like BBC interviews or whatever, and they just kind of picked random ones, and then they had some like British person be like narrator be like, "This is what happened next," and then narrate their feud.
Were you sorry that you didn't nab that third Oscar?
Oh, please be sorry. It broke my heart. My two children came with me to the Oscars the night of Jane. Michael and Beatty were in the audience. It was a rough shot. I couldn't believe it. I was so sure this time, because it was that kind of a part. Really should have had it, no question.
Do you think she should have been nominated for whatever happened to Baby Jane?
No, I do not. I'm very honest about it. I think I should have been.
The she Betty referred to there was, of course, Joan. And to make matters worse for Betty, when Anne Bancroft was declared the night's big winner, the award was actually collected by Joan, an arrangement she made in advance, knowing that Bancroft couldn't attend because she was busy appearing in a play. Amazingly, the director Robert Aldrich attempted to repeat the success of Baby Jane by casting the two arch rivals in his 1964 film, Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. Even more amazingly, they both signed on. But Betty...
Yeah, that...
I guess that wasn't the one where she talks about the name of Oscars, but I do have that somewhere.
Yeah, but what's interesting about the whole Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte situation too is that Joan Crawford agreed to do it if she got top billing, and Bette Davis agreed to do it if she made more money.
I think I know what I would have preferred personally.
Yeah, I don't mind top billing, whatever, because that could have been an Oscars thing for. But I think Joan Crawford should have gotten a Best Supporting Actress nomination because again, she's an able-bodied woman playing a woman in a wheelchair, and she did not fuck that up at all. Like you don't see her moving her legs or anything. Like she really she probably had to, part of her research, because she probably did somewhat of a method acting skill by doing research, was learning what people in wheelchairs are like without their legs, how they move around, or if they get out of their wheelchairs and stuff like that. Like I was amazed at that. I mean, they both gave physical performances in this movie, and I don't think, and I don't think Joan Crawford gets enough credit for playing a woman in a wheelchair, despite not being, she's able-bodied.
Yeah, that is a little taboo right now. They're not really sure how we feel in current modern society with like these characters should be played by actual disabled people. So can we go backwards and be like, she still did it very, I mean, look at The Miracle Worker, where we have someone portraying deaf who's not actually deaf as well, same exact year. But you're right, it is very hard to commit to that. And as she's pulling herself up and down those steps, it couldn't help but make me think of Misery, which is, of course, in this Psycho-biddy category of film that kind of gets birthed by this film, do you feel
Yeah,
like?
the
Or would you
entire,
say a little earlier?
Yeah, the entire subgenre comes out of the. I mean, like at least that's what film scholars consider it.
Yeah,
They're
like this was like
Yeah,
like it was given like a term. Like they're like, what's a term for films where older women just lose their grip on reality and go insane? Ah, let's call it psycho-biddy, or nickname it hacksploitation.
I like the second one better, to be honest.
Me too.
Yes, you taught me these ones. Yeah.
I have to be honest, guys. If you look up like Wikipedia's definition of like the listing of these films, between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, which actors do you think has the most films listed?
I'm gonna say Joan Crawford.
Joan Crawford.
Longer.
Yep, most of her movies in like the 50s to 60s, and even her last film, Trog, are considered like classic psycho-biddy films. You got Baby Jane, you got Straight Jacket, you got. I'm like looking at like all these films, and I'm like, all these films are Joan Crawford films. Like she's the queen of hacksploitation, in my opinion.
She also did the Autumn Leaves one.
Yes,
she's like out of her mind,
Yes.
and her younger lover, and that was
her younger lover is a little. He's the one who's crazy. Like you see like electroshock treatment therapy being done on him, and like there's a lot of gaslighting in that film too. And it was just, I was like, I mean, she kind of had to resort to doing those types of movies where it's like, you know, she was kind of still considered a sex symbol to a lot of men in their 30s and 40s, and they were like, I get to bed Joan Crawford. That's amazing. Like a lot of men in their career have told stories about like, I bed Joan Crawford. It was she came on to me, and it was great.
there's the long well, it's kind of interesting that the two films she did with Robert Aldrich, right, are
Straight Jacket,
and then this one, and it's like I don't know, and they were like very close, like they were very close friends. They were both people who had kind of been shunned a little bit by like mainstream Hollywood by that point, like, and so was Bette Davis. Obviously, they're like, oh, you're getting older, like we don't really, you know, like, but it's clearly like out of all the movies they could have done, like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is an amazing way to say, no, like I still have complete agency over all of this stuff. Like being middle-aged doesn't mean I have to stop starring in movies. Look at this. And I think that's like incredible.
But
I think what's so successful about this.
Oh no, you go, Katie.
I was gonna say what is so successful is the performances that we get from these characters, because of the reality of not only are they having a feud, but they're all also literally people who have seen people go and have these lives, who have lived adjacent these lives. And it's so real and raw that if you tried to remake this today, it just wouldn't have any of these. And I do want to say to Kristina's point about the acting, where you have Joan Crawford in all of these hacksploitation films, which have, by their definition, a need for a mental breakdown. As an actress, portraying a mental breakdown, that's really hard acting. Like, yeah, she's good at it.
Yeah, that's why I recommend watching that Straight Jacket movie. That's a good one. But also, like, apparently they did remake Whatever Happened to Baby Jane with Olivia de Havilland and her sister. Which I was like, what?
Oh.
Like for like TV or whatever. So I don't know, but I heard that there was like a remake starring like some other Hollywood actresses who happen to be sisters or whatever in real life, and I was like, okay, the only one I can think of is Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine. But but it's still shocking to me that it was Joan Crawford, despite this feud that's been going on for you know, up until this point, like 30 years. She's like, I want Bette Davis in this movie with me. I need her in this movie with me. I feel like we could do really well together in this movie. Like that still shocks me to this day that she was willing to, you know, whatever. I'm the better, but I want her in this movie. I want her in my movie.
Yeah,
like,
I mean it's a long-standing thing too, because for a while they had talked. Robert Aldrich and Joan Crawford had talked about how they wanted Bette Davis to be in something, because they felt like having the two of them side by side in a movie and to be doing something obviously that's like conflict, like there had to be conflict involved, that they felt like that could really do well. And it obviously fucking does. It jumps literally their hostility to each other, and they let it run wild obviously on set. Like, you know, but like you can feel the hostility that these two actresses have to each other, both on screen and off screen, throughout the whole thing. It engulfs you while you're watching this.
Yeah, it makes me wonder. You guys see the photo, the two of them on the set where they're both like posing in like their chairs and they're both smiling at the camera. A lot of people, according to alleged rumors, they were having a good conversation between each other, like a honest to God good conversation, like civil. And a lot of people wondering, like, what in the hell did we like? What happened? And some people do think that like Robert, but again, legend. Robert Aldrich would like kind of like say just to say little things about each other, which is what a lot of directors do to this day when there's like a movie where there's rivals. Like it's like, oh, so they're talking shit about you. Oh, they're talking shit about you just to get the performance going. But I'm over here thinking they already hate each other, but like maybe they would have made amends while making this movie, and that cannot happen because what if the performances would be different? The chemistry wouldn't feel as real. Because
I don't know. The amount of antagonism they have to have towards each other on screen, I can't possibly see how they could have.
It's not acting; it's all real. Like that's why I love this movie. It's like you could tell that this is all real. Like, yeah, they're acting, but like, it's real.
Yeah,
it's real.
I don't
real.
see how like the plot of the
Jared Leto.
Yeah. It really is. Oh, it's like Jared Leto on like, the Suicide Squad or whatever when he was literally sending dead rats to everybody.
Yeah, it's like Morbid Time, but an actually good film, instead of that crap.
Well, also too, he had to play a physically disabled dude, and because he was like taking it too seriously, it would take like days to actually film one scene involving him because he was like, I gotta go to the bathroom. It's gonna take me 5 hours. Like
one of the more fascinating things about this kind of feud is that obviously, like, you can watch a lot of interview clips and they take digs at each other, obviously, in every interview, right? Like, they're like, oh, I don't think I deserved the Oscar. She didn't. Like, they do that kind of stuff. But they're always quick to be like, well, we're not really enemies, right? Like, we just didn't really have the chance to become friends. Like, shit like that, where you're like, you can read between the lines, but they do a good job keeping it close to the vest enough that, like, you really have to get the information about their feud from a lot of secondhand sources. Yeah. And of course, everybody loves to blah, 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 blah in Hollywood, right? Like, they love to say so there's all these different things like Joan Crawford, like, they couldn't decide whether she did or didn't wear a weightlifting belt, like a lead belt, when she was being dragged around out of the wheelchair in this movie, but everybody agreed that she did put rocks in her fucking dress. Like,
or of course the stitches.
Petty.
Yeah.
Well, the other part that's like so over the top with how petty it is that she would just start coughing. Like if the take went well and Bette Davis pulled it off, she would just go. So then they'd have to be like, all right, cut. Like we're starting to take over again, knowing full well that Bette Davis had a back injury. Like that's the whole point of this bit, I guess. Like
see people today like I think of Lucy Liu and Bill Murray in the first Charlie's Angels movie, but like this has to be a decades long like feud. Like there's no other feud in Hollywood that can live up to this. This is like the OG Hollywood feud, in my opinion.
Yeah, or at least it's the OG Hollywood feud, and it happened at a time when gossip columnists like Hedda Hopper and whatever like. They would
Luella Parsons.
They make things so much worse by twisting.
And they were rivals too. Luella Parsons. They used to be friends, but then they started like people were talking shit about them to each other, and that's how they became mortal enemies in competition.
That's supposed to be their game, and they just let other people like do it to them. They're like, she said,
we did a whole Bailey Series did a whole dark history about how gossip came to be, and I was like, guys, they're going to talk about Luella Parsons and Hedda Hopper and how they once were friends and how they became enemies. And lo and behold, that's exactly what she did, because they kind of invented the gossip of, early Hollywood, because a lot of stories had to be concealed, like Loretta Young's pregnancy with Clark Gable's illegitimate daughter. And stuff like that, which we now realize it was actually a date rape and not an affair. Now that everyone's dead, including the daughter, they were like, yeah, actually, here's what really happened. Like, and that's kind of sad that we didn't get that. Like, we don't get the closure until everyone in old Hollywood dies when it comes to a situation about their lives. Like,
which is one of those things that are far more interesting about like this period of time, because now that kind of stuff, because the gossip columnist like Hedda Hopper, like Llewellyn Parsons, like that kind of person was the conduit for the most information from Hollywood. Like that's where you would get that information, and if they're the conduit, they can decide, which they very much did, who they like and who they don't like, and who they want to have sympathy for and who they don't, and whose career they want to prop up and who they want to protect. And it's like, that's why you don't find out that information until long after everybody's dead. But today there's far too, like, number one, there's far too many places that you can go to. Social
media too, a lot of people just expose their lives every day or whatever. So it's like, you know, that's why paparazzi, just the tabloids don't have what it takes anymore, because everyone's posting their shit on social media.
I wish the tabloids you know, were a little bit more humble after they gave us fucking Trump.
True.
More than anything else. So I found a bunch of clips. Let me try to I was hoping to try to figure out which one was the one with the Oscar conversation, but I think it's this one.
My Oscar Mayer wiener.
There are different versions of how the rivalry started. One has this man at the heart of it, the actor, Franchot Tone, Bette Davis co-star in the 1935 film Dangerous. It's said that Betty fell for him head over heels. But he was already seeing, yes, you guessed it, Joan Crawford, and would go on to become the second of Joan's 4 husbands. Another version says that Bette Davis was furious when a role she'd turned down became one of Crawford's greatest successes, the 1945 film Mildred Pierce. Betty had been the studio's first choice for the title role, but when she turned it down, Joan lobbied hard for the part, and her efforts paid off when it won her a Best Actress Oscar. Whichever version is correct, the animosity continued throughout the filming of Baby Jane, and the stories around it are legend, or maybe myths. How Joan Crawford's marriage to the chairman of Pepsi led to Bette Davis getting a Coca-Cola machine installed on the set. Bette Davis will always be considered one of Hollywood's great actresses. In her eyes, Joan Crawford was merely a movie star who'd got lucky and slept her way to the top. Betty felt she had credibility, partly because producers never considered her as a sex symbol. And that's a subject he discusses here with Joan Bakewell in 1972.
How dare those Hollywood moguls at the time when you first went from New York to Hollywood suggest that you couldn't be as sexy and glamorous as any other star?
Well, according to their standards, you see, I wasn't. Now, this was really in the very beginning of talking pictures, and all of us who came out from the theater were not actressy kind of people. You know, we sort of had our own color hair and maybe a couple of teeth crooked. We looked, you know, totally different, and they were very, very puzzled. You know, and off screen, we didn't go around all dressed up, say like a Harlow or somebody would, you know? So they just did not understand us at all. So we just were, you know, they called me the little brown wren. But then, finally, you see, nobody helps you when you go about makeup or about the camera. It's a wholly new profession, really. And finally, they find out, you know, the best way to wear your hair. They put a makeup on you that does the best for you. It's just a slow process of getting to look on the screen what you really thought you looked like in life. You know? Because I thought I was fairly attractive till I got to Hollywood, but I didn't for very long. You know.
But you did have to fight off all their attempts to glamorize you in their terms.
Oh, yes, yes. Hepburn, Margaret Sullivan, and I were the 3 who really fought it. You know, although when I went to Warner's, they made me, you know, really bleach my hair. And I knew it was going to limit me the part, so I snuck down one day and had it, you know, put back the ash blonde hair I'd always had. And 1 year later, Mr. Wallace sent for me and said, "You've had your hair re-dyed." 1 year later. He'd never seen it. But if I had gone for permission, he wouldn't have allowed it, you see. And I didn't want to go through life with a very bleached head of hair.
But it was the factory getting to work, because they even suggested changing your name, didn't they?
Oh, yes. They wanted to call me Bettina Dawes. And to be a little vulgar in this illustrious group, I said I refuse to be called Between the Drawers all my life. Which I would have. No question.
It's very well you joking about it now, but of course at the time, for a young girl...
Heartbreak.
It must have been
It was absolutely heartbreak. Yes, I remember sitting in the outer office and Mr. Lemley was talking to somebody, and he was talking about me, not knowing I was there. And he said, yeah, she's got as much sex appeal as Slim Somerville. And you see, you're so right to... Oh, I was defeated. And for instance, they would say, who wants to get her at the end of the picture? And this does... True. And this really does catastrophic things to your ego. And I didn't have a lot of ego, and never have had lots anyway, which is a big misnomer about actors. We had very little ego.
Not much ego. I'm not sure Betty was being totally straight with the audience there. But it's certainly true that in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, both stars had to embrace looking well past their prime, which, according to Betty, was something that just...
Yeah, what's so interesting about how Bette Davis viewed herself and Joan Crawford comparisons is that, you know, Joan Crawford got into the film industry first. And from many biographies about Joan Crawford, she knew that she had to take the job of being an actress seriously. But not only that, Joan Crawford wanted to learn how to direct and what the grips were doing, what the lighting was about, like, because she wanted to make sure what looked good on was best for her for camera. But also, too, she found her own look. Like Bette Davis playing, like, oh, they had to make me up, like something that worked better for me. But Joan Crawford always found what worked for her. And once what she found what worked for her, you do not interfere with that. She would collaborate with oh God, what was the name of that one designer? Fabian, I think. There was a designer who always made Joan's like dresses, her outfits for films back in the day. And so like she was always collaborating with people to, like, you know, how do I keep up with the looks of today? But I just feel like these two misunderstood each other. Like, because they do have a similar like way of working in Hollywood, like the learning aspects, how to improve your craft, how to improve how you look. But I just feel like in the end, Bette Davis just didn't care what she would look like on camera, because she was like, I'm not playing all these glamorous women. I'm playing like sardonic, spunky, you know, women. That who cares about how glamorous I look?
Yeah, especially in a film like this. It's a very interesting topic to bring up. You get films like Monster with Charlize Theron, where like Hollywood also wants to say you're in a dramatic role if you're an ugly woman. Yes. So like it's this push and pull where you're like, don't glamorize a character that's meant to be ugly, that's meant to be real, especially like with Baby Jane. So it's funny how, you know, they're trying to deal with aging in the film and also literally in real life are fighting the directors from allowing them to portray women aging.
Yeah. There was this one movie called A Woman's Face that Joan Crawford did, where she played like a half, like disfigured woman, and they were like, they were still trying to figure out how to make her look glamorous. I'm like, she's Joan Crawford. Even with half of the foreign face, she still looks fantastic.
I feel like in some ways we've like sometimes almost lost that with like newer films. Sometimes people go real deep into it, but a lot of times you'll see like The Apocalypse or something, and they're still wearing like, you know, like regular shoes, or like, you know what I mean? Like there's these little details. And that's what I found so fascinating about the nail polish thing, because you know, you have to like look at someone like Joan Crawford, who's like, you know, given up, well, really not that much stuff for this movie. She still looks beautiful, and she's still like well done and glamorous in this film. But
who's
like,
still doing her eyebrows?
And false lashes too. She's wearing them false lashes, but she's always known for wearing.
I find it like the dichotomy between her kind of glamorous while also having a snap spine, like talented film actress, and then Bette Davis jumping right into the fucking crazy role where she was willing to literally put like her thought, I think, which I really liked, was this is the kind of person who puts on makeup, forgets about it, and then goes to bed still with the makeup. So she had all of those layers. And I know, KT, you could definitely talk about this because you watched the video and then you made that cool video today. But like her whole thing is that she put on layers and layers and layers of makeup and let it, congeal. And then her daughter, her oldest daughter, Edie or whatever, is the girl in this, is the neighbor, the annoying neighbor's daughter that's like
you can't act.
Yeah, but like she's in this, and then so she told
baby.
She definitely but she saw Bette Davis with all the layers of caked up makeup and was like, "Mom, you've gone too far this time," which is like my favorite line.
And I love that Bette Davis was like, "If you don't let me do this makeup, I'm not gonna be in this goddamn movie." Like she went to gun with it. And honestly, when you put on grease makeup like that, like they did back in the day, it affects the quality of your skin over time. So not only would Baby Jane put on makeup like that, still, she would be putting it on a very pockened, very difficult to conceal face. And like anything shy of leaning into that, you don't get this amazing villain. And it's kind of funny because I feel like we want to say that Baby Jane is the villain, but also Blanche is kind of the villain. So like both these ladies get to be the protagonist and the villain in this film. It's fucking great.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the fact that this is one of those great movies, and to have a movie like this work, you have to have the performances be so fucking on point. But it's one of those movies where the final scene of the movie, or just really any one scene, right? Like it's a masterclass in one scene, changing the entire trajectory of the movie. So you watch it all the way through, never watching it before, like not knowing. I mean, I'm sure most people know what the twist is, but like you don't know what the twist is.
I crippled myself.
Yeah, so you get to that scene, and every interaction in the entire movie plays differently when you know that, and you watch it like a second time. Like, and that is such an amazing like quality for. I mean, there's a lot of films that have twists, like
and Betty's Jane completely is changing. Like, oh my god, we could have been friends. I want to give me and my sister 2 big strawberry ice cream cones, please. My sister's gonna be a big star one day in the movies. Like,
she's so and the other thing about the performances in this is that like the alcohol has melted her brain. Like, I'm sure that she's already kind of a psychotic personality, right? Like Baby Jane, like, she's definitely someone.
She was always when she was a kid, so
it's like a Shirley Temple kind of thing, except she didn't become a UN ambassador. She became like like a monster. But like the alcohol so melted her brain. Yeah, no, I'm just saying like the alcohol has so melted her brain at this point that like she is like a little kid. And if you've ever like seen someone that either has like late stage alcoholism where it's kind of killing them to that level, or like any kind of dementia, like somebody who's going through that mental decline, I guess they really do start to become like a child again. But then also like the added layer of her childhood being like the one time things have ever actually gone well for her is just like like Jesus Christ.
Plus plus Blanche has basically stuck her in childhood indefinitely. She puts that thing in her contract where she says, "Oh, you'll always be in my films," and it makes her seem like she's a really sweet sister, but also it means that Baby Jane will always be financially destitute or determinant on this other character. She's codependent for the rest of her life, and codependency is like a major thing you need to get out of to become your own self-actualized adult.
Well, it's not
like
not to snap correct. It's not that she's always in her films. It's the thing in the in the contract is she
has to have a film of her own.
So for every film, number one, it doesn't give her the opportunity to be in one of Blanche's, better films.
Good films.
And so basically she's consigning her to this hell of only being in bad films. And the more she drinks and the more of a problem she is, and the more studios label women who, go out of their just difficult or like a problem, right? Like women, like studios love to do that to women who
that Seinfeld episode, they put difficult on your chart.
So so she's consigned to not only not being in Blanche's films that are like the ones that are good, that are getting all the awards and stuff, she's consigned to being in her own bad films, and the studio just pawning her like the worst things. And if you know about, like, you know, I mean, we all do like the studio system in this time, right? Like there's A films, there's B films, and then there's like, you know, the bottom kind of garbage that they put out. So you have to imagine by this point they're putting her in the rankest garbage, and she's also not a great actor at this point either.
Yeah, and another thing people don't, you know, Baby Jane, she was a child star, and we all know what happens to quite a bit of child stars. They don't make it into adult stardom.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with her. And Blanche felt obligated because her mother said, you know, when you do find your success, make sure you treat, you know, Jane better than the way she treats you. And she's like,
yeah. And in that moment, like the book ending the movie by those two scenes, right? Like in the beginning, her like showing how much stuff Blanche has kind of gone through in that period to get to that point, while her sister, whatever, and then she has that sibling rage where it's like, if I ever get the chance to have my thumb on this person, I absolutely will do it. And then bookending it by realizing that, like, not only is she stuck in this perpetual you know, childhood or whatever, like childhood state with her brain at that point, like yeah, like literally she was manipulated into believing that she snapped her sister's spine, and it's like, holy shit, like,
yeah. And Blanche realized and Blanche realized that she did all this for nothing. Like, she crippled herself for nothing in the end, because of look at how Jane was treating her. Just because her movies were, you know, Blanche Hudson was always going to be a success even after her death, because she got a lot of popularity with her films and television.
Yeah, well, and her plan, I think, you know, is just to put Jane into a home. Which, if you're looking at someone who's a difficult person, who's, you know, difficult enough that they crippled you in like a fit of alcoholic rage, that's one thing. You're like, all right, I get that. Like, I have some sympathy for. I know she's your sister, but like, she's a danger to everyone. But then to be like, oh well, I actually manipulated her into believing that she snapped my spine, and then I'm just gonna put her into a home, is like, oh no, that is not only devious, that is like, I don't know, like fucking.
Yeah, you might be the worst character in this film.
You wasted your life for nothing, only for her to go insane and try to kill you. Like, but I want to talk about Bette Davis's daughter, Beatty, for a few minutes, because that performance was bad. like she's not, she looks like her mother, but she just couldn't act. And fun fact, Beatty was 16 at the time, engaged to a nearly 30-year-old man.
Oh.
Bette Davis was fully supportive of the marriage and the wedding, everything. But you know what Beatty did in the end? Wrote a book about how abusive and alcoholic her mother was.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds familiar? Oh. Which makes me believe that Kristina Crawford definitely lied, because even Bette Davis stuck up for Joan when Mommy Dearest came out. She's like, Joan Crawford would not want me to pity her, whatever, but whatever that girl's name is, she did an awful thing to Joan. Like, that was disrespectful, disgusting, and full of lies.
Yeah, well, the whole accusation is that she just adopted those kids in order to like seem like a better person. And it's like, that seems like a lot of work to like seem like a better person. Like,
yeah. But also, too,
I mean, she was very petty and very involved in that for a long time. So maybe.
Yeah, what's funny, too, is that Kristina Crawford, even though she hated the movie, she goes to drag shows where people do drag Faye Dunaway's Joan Crawford, though. And makes a profit off of all that.
People love doing whatever happened to Baby Jane drag.
Yep. Hacksploitation drag.
Yeah.
So then
they even did like a RuPaul's Drag Race.
Joan Crawford, like old, yeah. But like, what was funny is BD wrote this book when Bette Davis was still alive, but in failing health. Which was everyone was like comparing it to Mommy Dearest, because a lot of people were starting to think, well, maybe these daughters of these Hollywood legends are lying, because if one girl's making a very same book about it, even though Bette Davis was nothing but loving and supportive towards her daughter. And Betty was like, you know what? You're not going to be in my will. None of her grandkids were in her will. Like, only her adopted son was in the will. And him and BD stopped talking.
I mean, the central claim that she makes is that her mother was like unnecessarily controlling and demanding, and I feel like any Hollywood person could say that about their parent. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't seem like
she allowed you to marry a 30-year-old when you were 16. Like, that's not controlling, that's supportive. I wouldn't support that.
And did
like,
she
I'm
ever
the
do
right
any
person
other
about this.
films? Anything else besides this?
BD?
Like anything
I don't
tangible?
really-
Yeah.
I don't think so, because I mean, in the show Feud, they actually show like them having to take after take after take after take with BD, which was the case because she was acting against Anna Lee, an esteemed blonde bombshell from London, who for a lot of us we know her as Lila Quartermain from General Hospital. That was like her famous role for a lot of Americans.
Wow.
So BD having to do scenes with established English actress was probably difficult and a little like overwhelming for her, but it goes to show that sometimes talent doesn't rub off.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if she's been in anything else.
Well, like
that's, I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
it's just
another
funny because-
classic case.
Yeah, and also too, like even like her BD was talking wonderful things about her mom up until Kristina Crawford wrote "Mommy Dearest," and then went, "I can do that too."
So she was only in Payment on Demand and then Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Those are her two things.
Yeah. Yep.
She's now
I hope she burns in hell. I mean, she's still alive. She became a born again Christian and pastor. So
yeah, I was gonna say she has a church and everything. That's crazy. In Charlottesville, she's the head of a fucking born again ministry in Charlottesville. That's crazy.
We should invite her on the podcast. Be like, let's talk about your mother's films and and your ministry. Oh God. Oh God.
I feel like a lot of these books are just like a cash grab.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Because
They all have like the
like,
same synopsis in a way.
I'm all for like people like confronting their parents and like, either decide not to talk to them anymore if they're like abusive or like whatever. But it just seems like if you're gonna write a whole like tell-all book about it, you're trying to make money off that. Like it seems like more than find any kind of closure.
Yeah. Because apparently Joan Crawford was aware that Kristina was writing "Mommy Dearest." Apparently, like she was, because the twins, Kathy and Katie, I think that the twins' names were the younger daughters were closer to Joan than Christopher and Kristina were, and they were like, "Yeah, Kristina's writing a book about you, and it's not looking good." And that's also, some people say that's what also killed Joan in the end, was the fact that Kristina was writing a book about her like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though she did help her with her acting.
Yeah, I mean, this really makes me.
But also ruined her acting career too.
It makes me think about the whole concept of basically what the film is about, having Baby Jane be a child actor, where like we have these Nepo babies. They get to get a chance at being actors because of who they are. They're given this choice. And in the novel that this is based on, there's a couple of monologues that talk about this, the warmth of the spotlight and this desire to be famous, and like how great and good that feels, and the kind of shit things you will do to get it back, like write a terrible fake story about your mother. And like when I think of Shakespeare's "It is better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all," do you guys think it is better to have famoused for a little bit than to have never famoused at all?
I mean, I think that this movie kind of posits it in an interesting way, because they're clearly like poor, at least pretty poor, right? When she gets famous, and the dad is her like kind of sleazy manager, and then obviously the parents die, and then they move to LA. But like, I don't necessarily, I'm not saying that it is or isn't, but like it does feel like it adds another dimension if you're in like early 20th century America, and you're like, oh, I'm like, our family is destitute, but we can take this on the road and be like a vaudevillian act, and get out of this like desolate poverty at that point, and like, be something. And then I think it's corrosive. Like I think it destroys you. But I do think that poverty, it makes number one, it makes you more ambitious to get the fuck out of it, which makes you more likely to do the most and ambitious and kind of freakish things, to want that attention and to want that that love and that applause and everything like that. And it makes you more desperate, more hungry, which is more corrosive too. So I don't know how I feel about fame, but I've also never been famous for anything. So I feel like that's one of those things that, like, like the monkey's paw. Like,
yeah. And to piggyback off of that for us too, is that, a lot of actors back in the day started in vaudeville.
yeah,
A lot of vaudevillian actors would move to Hollywood and get into the studio system, like Judy Garland, Shirley Temple, even again managed by, which was ironic because she was managed by her parents, but her mom was more concerned. Like her dad was all about the money, but her mom was more concerned about her staying grounded and not ending up like a Judy Garland type or something like that. Because Shirley Temple quit acting like by like the 40s, But Judy Garland, of course, had a mother who was terrible, and she always made sure to point out how terrible her mother was in later interviews with her kids. Oh, child actors are thank you, Pinkerbell. Child actors are chewed up and spit out by predators with total control of their lives and careers in a system they don't have the capacity to understand. Every parent who pushes their kid in that,
direction knows they're going to be preyed on.
Yep.
I mean,
there's that HBO documentary about the kids working in Nickelodeon that is really upsettingly true to that in our own time period.
Yeah,
it's a dirty book. I'm glad my mom died. That's like I read the first few chapters of it, but it's definitely one of those fucked up situations in that same. I mean, she was in that same milieu that they were preying on.
Yes, exactly.
In that. I think that there's also like a thing of this period of time when everything was completely in flux. Like as a parent that's trying to be a manager, like you probably feel like you have more control over the situation if you're pushing your kid on stage to be a vaudeville actor. Like in this, her dad's on stage with her, but then at the same time, there's like the flux of like kids getting pushed all of a sudden into Hollywood, and then Hollywood's a completely different animal, I think, than the vaudeville scene. There were a lot of like young kids on the vaudeville scene, including like Charlie Chaplin. Like, you know what I mean? Like they came out of that moment in time, and then they kind of got into film for actually casually in some cases, like Charlie Chaplin. Like they were like, hey, we're looking for someone to fill in for our star, can you do it? And like something and there's another transition where it's the transition from silent films to talkies, and that happens in the same time period that you're looking at in
if
whatever
you're lucky.
Yeah. Well, also too, y'all know the Coogan law, right? Jackie Coogan, one of the first big child stars, was swindled all of his money by his parents, and they made a law to like, if you're managing your kids, they have to have money. They have to have money. And thankfully, his estate probably gets some goods because he was in the Addams Family. He was Uncle Fester in the 1964 TV show.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, he was.
Yep, that's him. Yep. And another thing too is that we gotta remember that when it comes to child stars versus like Hollywood stars that were established as young adults like Crawford and Davis, is that the studio system always was treating them differently. They weren't on the same schedule because a lot of the younger kids were doing like musical movies and stuff like that. So we think of like Mickey Rooney and oh god, what was that one soprano that Judy Garland competed with at one time. We just, there's like a whole bunch of them who were doing singing, dancing, and all that, triple threats. So they were on drugs compared to probably like the older Hollywood stars probably weren't on as many drugs.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's see.
So yeah, I think we're talking a lot about the whole thing with kids in it, but I also think that there's something to be said for the way that starlets are treated. Like, yeah, they weren't exactly treating Crawford and Bette Davis as that, as the way that they would treat kid stars, but they were sexualizing them. And Bette Davis talks about this in her memoir, this and that. Like, there were several times where she didn't want to be so sexualized. She wanted to be funny. She wanted to be more witty. And so like, the early sexualization of starlets in Hollywood is also problematic in the same sort of way that we're seeing people talk about in the chats, where like, if you're making this transition from child star to starlet, the difference is we have to start sexualizing you. And when do we do that?
Yeah, especially if you're someone who looks like because Shirley Temple always had her like young, youthful, plain face. So it was definitely difficult to probably try to sexualize her. But like, they tried to do with Judy Garland, though, as long as she was on diet pills and stuff like that. Or even one of my favorite films that Joan Crawford did in a silent film was The Unknown, a movie that she starred opposite Lon Chaney, which she said, I learned more about filmmaking than any ever like film under his him being her mentor. and she had to play like a sexy, scantily clad daughter of a circus owner. And so this man would use his daughter to be objectified when Lon Chaney's character was throwing like darts at her and knives and stuff like that with his feet because he was armless, allegedly. It's a good silent film. I recommend it. It's like an hour long. So Joan Crawford knew early on that, I could play like sexual, like I could play like not necessarily femme fatales, but she always played those shop girls, rag to riches, where she would get all glammed up, look very sexy, look very attractive. And of course, that slowly was dying down as she got older into like the 1940s, where she was playing, I really want to go over Mildred Pierce one day because I've read the book and it's a lot different from the movie. But you have to figure out once you're no longer the shop girl, you're no longer the it girl, you are considered box office poison. Because remember that article that came out back in 1938 or 39? Here's a list of actresses and actors who were box office poison. And it was some of the great Greta Garbo, Norma Shear, all these good Hollywood stars from the 30s. They're like, nope, they're not viable anymore.
Well, yeah, and that's why they made this film. Crawford and Davis were like, we can't find roles for ourselves right now that's even halfway fucking decent.
Yep.
And so, I believe that.
And you'd hope that it would have opened up a little bit after Gloria Swanson doing the Sunset Boulevard, which this movie definitely this movie is a lot like Sunset Boulevard, but
yes.
if you took there were two if there were two Gloria Swanson type characters, right? This is and they were going head to head instead of the very also the guy in fucking Sunset Boulevard reminds me of the Victor Buono character a little bit in this. He's just such a sleazebag the entire time. He's like, oh, I can just be a layabout at this rich lady's house. But I think that there's the thing that really is fucked up that I have always found deeply fucking disturbing, both with child star kind of stuff like Shirley Temple and with beauty pageant stuff. I've always found that it feels like there's something kind of off and almost sexualized about the way that these kids are thrown into these situations. And it's I've always been uncomfortable with the notion of child stars altogether. I mean, it just seems like it's number one, it's it's a very dark place for a kid to get thrown into, number one.
Yeah. Look at Dana Plato.
And number two, the appeal of it, dolling a kid up in makeup and an adult dress, adult clothes, it just feels. It's always felt very off to me.
That's literally a drag show for kids, and yet conservatives don't seem to mind those because they like to sexualize children. Let's be real here.
And the irony continues.
So much worse than anything I've ever seen at a drag show. It just feels more obscene than anything I've ever seen in a drag show.
Yeah.
And I was going to say the irony continues in the fact that you can see this sort of abuse take place with actors like Gary Coleman, who were young men and not children. They were adults playing children and yet still got the child star treatment just for looking like a kid. Oppressive, impressive.
I mean, the Munchkin, the Wizard of Oz.
We're grown-ass adults, 40-year-old men wanted to take Judy Garland out for a date. And she's like, oh no, my mother won't. But then again, Judy Garland liked to exaggerate her Wizard of Oz stories, but it could have happened. We all? Yeah.
I think though, the vaudeville thing is fascinating to me because I feel like vaudeville was such an interesting part of American culture that's just been completely not just American. I mean, it was happening in England too, but it's that level of theater where it's everybody in town, they tour around and everyone in town comes to see the show. They come to this event and that's one of the few times that everyone in the community, there's church, whatever's happening at the theater, at a time when there's no, or movies are either just starting or there's no movies yet. It's just such a fascinating time, the live theater experience or whatever. But I can also see how getting involved in also that level of show business, right? The physicality of it and stuff is probably not great for a kid. And the beginning of the movie kind of stands out for that too. And adding the parents, it's always the parents that are the vultures that are trying to, suck the cash out of whatever act their kid can put out or whatever. And
or live vicariously.
Yeah. Also, Sherry Prime, what movies would pair well with this Sunset Boulevard? Yeah, we are. For those who don't know, we were going over the whole genre of this called Psycho-biddy or hacksploitation, and to describe it is usually about a woman who, an older woman, maybe a old Hollywood actress or whatever, or just a character
dealing with
going
aging.
Yeah, aging and going insane. I have a list. There's a certain list. Berserk, which is
checklist.
Berserk, which is another Joan Crawford movie. Cry of the Banshee, Die Mommy Die, The Devil's Daughter, Flowers in the Attic, obviously, that whole because the grandmother and even the mother. Greta, 2018 film. Home for the Holidays from 1972. Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte.
I love Wait Until Dark.
Yes.
Letterhack says Wait Until Dark in the chat. I love that. I love that one.
Straight Jacket is definitely on that list too. Last Night in Soho, one of my favorites. Good one too. Mommy Dearest. Because of course. Mountain Motel Massacre, My Cousin Rachel from 1952. The Nanny, a 1965 film. The Night Walker, Night Watch, Persecution, which is another film. Queen of Blood, Rosemary's Baby, The Skeleton Key, Straight Jacket, Sunset Boulevard,
also from the
Trog, another Joan Crawford movie. It's a long list of Joan Crawford movies in here.
Yes.
Whatever Happened to Alice, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Who Slew Auntie Roo, The Witches, 1966, and then X from 2022 because of Pearl's insanity.
Any movie you could say whatever happened to, and then a woman's name.
You can really make a whole. Yeah, I would like a prequel series about their careers, like after Baby Jane couldn't transition into adulthood, but Blanche became famous. Where's that movie?
Well, say it loud enough into the salt shaker, and a Netflix executive will show up at your front door.
Let's do it. Come on, Ryan Murphy. Just kidding.
Yeah,
I did want to take a hot second
else.
and just tangent to talk a little bit about the cinematography, because it reminded me of a film that we had covered already. I think Conan was also gone on this one. It was Frenzy, the Hitchcock film, which was in 1972 and a little bit later. Oh God, yeah. We're too nice. We'd have to really try.
Yes.
We can.
Oh my God.
We can pit you guys against each other.
We'll make it work.
Yeah.
Two women. What can they be besides enemies?
You know it. Just horrible.
It's diabolical with any person that has a Hollywood star temperament, or a bold actress temperament, or whatever, like that kind of ego. It's diabolical to put the two women's dressing rooms next to each other. And those are your two biggest things, especially in old Hollywood when there was a pretty open door policy. It feels deeply kind of it's a very conscious pitting of two women against each other.
There
was a couple of different things in this film that felt like they were conscious decisions, knowing that they had problems with each other.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the problems that they have with each other is the selling point, right? The difference, I think, between how this film is cast in the public imagination and the difference between how it really was. I mean, no pun intended, I guess, cast, but in the public imagination, it's almost like Joan Crawford and Bette Davis had no real agency in their feud and didn't know that they had a feud and didn't go into this with the knowledge that that's basically what they were going to be doing. They were going to be pitting them against each other, rather than, in public imagination, it's they just happen to have problems with each other, and then it was cast for views. But it's they knew that, and they played it up throughout this, and they let that fly, and I think they let it fly probably too far in some ways,
too close to the sun.
But it's not like either of them went into this their eyes closed. It was Joan Crawford that went to Bette Davis and said, look, on her hands and knees, and said, look, I know we have problems, but I think this could be great for both of us.
Yeah. That's the thing about Joan Crawford. She was a very smart businesswoman.
Yeah. But it's a little bit like when you have two friends that don't like each other, and that you've gotten them to agree to come to your birthday party on good wishes. And they had this, the animosity that they have over this ottoman that they shared once when they were younger. And so you get rid of all the seats in your party, and every single seat is an ottoman. And you're let's see what happens, because it's fun when they fight. You know what I mean? They definitely pushed them.
Oh, for sure. But it's also just the like I don't think you're wrong. It's just also like the selling point of the whole thing, and it's like you can't read
Of course.
that.
Yeah, that's why they
Yeah.
amped it up on purpose.
Yeah. So it's like you go to your two best friends or your two best friends that hate each other, and you're like, what I want for my birthday more than anything else is to see you guys fight. You know what I mean? Like that's like the big selling point. And it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, it works so fucking well.
Yeah.
But I do think that they let the I mean, I also think that it's one of those things where things are on like kind of a steep decline at certain points. Like Joan Crawford realizing that she's gonna have to make herself look unglamorous and then take off the nail polish and stuff, which I don't think she ended up doing. Like you can still see the nail polish in the shot, but like it feels like one of those things where it's like maybe things slip too far out of a zone where she realizes, oh shit, maybe I'm uncomfortable, pouring this much of my own personal stuff into this or whatever. But it's like she did agree up top, like, and recruited Bette Davis. You know what I mean? Like, so it's one of those funny things where.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, I mean, this feud still lives on to this day, even though they're both long gone. But on a funnier note, I told Katie and Forrest did not know this, but there was a bit of Bette Davis had an album for Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Yeah. She performed a little song called "Whatever Happened to Baby Jane."
I don't know. I would play that, but I don't know if I feel like it'll get flagged.
Yeah, it would.
I think for my sanity, we'll just say it's gonna get flagged because it's not a very good song.
It's not a good song. Susan Sarandon recreated that moment in Feud, by the way, which was kind of hilarious. And again, perfect casting for Bette Davis. It couldn't be played by any other woman who looked like her, because she has Bette Davis eyes.
Another great song you can listen to on your own time.
Yes, and also too with Susan Sarandon, like she kind of reminds me of Bette Davis in the way she's very like crass almost with the way she speaks too. Like she's good at accent work, but she's very like the way she talks is very, like very feminine, but very rough around the edges. And so, but then you listen to, Jessica Lange, and they almost in a weird way embodied Joan and Betty when they were doing promos for the film, but they actually did like each other. But it was funny because this was around the 2016 election. And so Susan Sarandon was talking shit about Hillary Clinton being all political in a lot of the interviews. And I was like, oh God, this is good. And you can see how uncomfortable Jessica Lange is because she's like, I don't do politics. Like it's.
So Bette Davis's album was Bette Davis Sings. And it says, including songs from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, All About Eve, Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, and Now Voyager. And I feel like, I wonder how many of those are like the same thing of like, whatever happened to Baby Jane, which is not the main song. Like she could have recorded her own version of
that harpsichord was busy during that film.
But like you could have put out her own like I like a letter from Daddy to Daddy or whatever like that. Song.
That song
like,
gives me the ick.
Yeah,
I don't want to ever hear that. Don't call me Dad. Don't call anyone Daddy.
I've written a letter to Daddy.
And they found a kid whose like voice was like they went out of their way to find a kid whose voice is extremely creepy for that.
Yeah,
which I already
they could do it in a minor key and piss Conan off.
I get extremely creeped out by like what I call like phonograph voice. Like when you listen to those old records, and then there's like the little bit of like a tinge to it. You're like, oh fuck, I hate this. Like like a good example. And I like all like songs they've done, but like the Ink Spots or whatever have like that same voice, like that they played all throughout like the Better Call Saul soundtrack or whatever. Like it's that tone of like I think it's both the machine and just the way people sang back then gives me the creeps. And her voice in
and
this
then the way it was recorded on them, it has a like
Also, guys, if you want to hear me sing the entire song, I've written a letter to Daddy. Please subscribe. So it's September, and subs are 30% off and 25% off. So
send proof of subs, and then she'll sing. She'll
because I could do a good impression of that voice because it's very like
But she like throughout the entirety of the movie, right? Like you hear the reflection of that child's voice while she's also singing it in her, like her gruff 40 years of smoker Bette Davis voice. Yes. And it's like both those things together add to this layer of like sadness, like kind of pathetic, like there's a clash that I really wanted to talk about like throughout this, which is Robert Aldrich obviously was someone who who understood modernity as like a concept, and it's kind of embodied in like the way that Beatty was in it as like a like a teen bobber girl or whatever in like the 1960s, like that kind of girl that listens to like, but like, so the difference between their apartment next door and the LA mansion, like that's vaudevillian and cobwebbed and kind of musty, and you can feel that coming off of everything that they own, and like that clash between modernity and this like vaudevillian past, just it's so good, like it works so well as like a aesthetic clash, and it makes you like, it's deeply uncomfortable, I think, and it's deeply off-putting.
And it's so indicative of the time period that it was made in, because I was saying earlier I wanted to get into the cinematography and the fact that this film is made in 62, so we're like right at the end of the Hays Code, and we're talking about like, oh my god, the modernity that is bursting in as we start to see auteur filmmaking take over from Hays Code films, and all of the films that they play that these women have been in for the majority of their lives, although sexualized, still existed in this code. There's like this anti-establishment commentary on Hollywood that we saw in May, December, where like, oh my god, I can't even believe they nominated one actor for an award on this because of what it was trying to say.
Yeah, another one too. They nominated Victor Buono for one as well. For it. And it's like his first film, I think that his first film role, and then he was in a lot of other stuff. And he was in Batman. That's literally the most famous for.
Yeah, it's still shocking me that Joan Crawford only won one Oscar in her life. Like, goddamn, for Mildred Pierce. And the way she won, she's like, I'm so sick, I can't go.
Yeah, she had to do it in bed. She got to accept her Oscar in bed holding a drink. Like,
bless.
The other thing,
I'd do that though.
Bette Davis was originally supposed to be the lead role of Mildred Pierce, and rejected, said that she didn't want to do it. And then Joan Crawford ended up winning her first Oscar for it, and it was like that was another thing in their like, you know, their great feud. It's like, oh, you're taking my sloppy seconds kind of roles, like.
But you know what Joan Crawford had to do, which was very beneath her to do, to give Mildred Pierce screen test. For an established actress like Joan Crawford, she had to do a screen test for that role.
Yeah, that's crazy, because she's like up on the chain at Warner Brothers at that point. Like,
it's
jeez.
By the way, I'm not from Buffalo, but I am from New York, upstate, but not Buffalo.
Close.
Yeah,
6 hours away. I almost went to college in Buffalo. It was the only SUNY school that accepted me.
Also, for those who don't know, Bette Davis always felt that Joan Crawford, allegedly she was bisexual, had a crush on her, and she was not going to do a film with her between two younger women where it seemed there was a lesbian subtext to it. And I'm like, yeah, but who cares?
This movie doesn't really have a lesbian subtext.
Not this one, but one that they could have worked on together back in like the 30s or 40s.
Yeah, well, so this is another time when you don't know how much is like the Hedda Hobb or Llewellyn Parsons kind of thing.
Well, she said the role was very D word, lesbian D slur, apparently. According to Betty, that's what Bette Davis said. But I was like,
Daddy.
She called Joan Crawford Dykey or something a bunch of times in like different. But
unless she was separating water, I really don't.
There's like, but you don't know how much of this is gossip columnist bullshit too. But like, there's a lot of times where when Joan Crawford was married to Franchot Tone, there was a bunch of times where she was rumored, like Bette Davis was rumored to be in love with him or to like really like want him, and she made a bunch of like very sexualized comments, like she's a pretty girl, I'd probably let her blah 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 blah, like, you know what I mean, like saying like that kind of like locker room talk kind of stuff. And it got reported in columns, and that's kind of so some of like the alleged, I guess, anti-bisexual bias, I guess. It really does come from like some pretty sexualized comments that she had allegedly made. But everything in old Hollywood is allegedly. You got to put that in front of it.
But also too, Joan Crawford was pregnant 7 times with Franchot. Lost them all. She couldn't conceive her own kid, which is why she adopted Kristina and then Christopher and then the twins. But it's funny because Franchot Tone was more of like, he never really got to be able to really make it in Hollywood. He kind of became more obscure by the 40s. He just I guess being married to Joan Crawford kind of boosted his career because they were in a few films together. I'm surprised that, Joan Crawford and Clark Gable had an affair throughout the 30s. They were the first like male, female of the talkie era to do like good, like collabs together, like in film, like romantic comedies, dramas. They were the first, like, and they had an affair, but he was married to a woman 3 times his age in a Catholic marriage. So he couldn't leave her, for Joan Crawford. But that always fascinated me as well. But also, why did Betty, once they divorced, why did Bette Davis try to go for Frank Tone after they divorced?
She was just going after, allegedly or whatever. Like, I don't know why she didn't go. It's probably she didn't want him anymore after they divorced. Like,
yeah, because she was with Joan. She wanted him when he was with Joan,
or at least when he was at the top of his game, right? Like her whole thing. Allegedly again, like, is that she liked to
allegedly
hook up co-stars, which he was one of her early co-stars, and but like once the guy's kind of used up and thrown out of fucking Hollywood, like why would you really want the guy, right? Like I think it's more about like power than anything else, and like number one, like what somebody can do for you, and number two, like your own form of power as like the star. I don't know. I feel like people just get used up and thrown out, which I like looking at the Frank Tone film credits, like for the last 2 decades of his life, everything he was in was a TV movie, which like I feel like gets said with such disdain, at least in that age, right? Like we're kind of in the golden age of TV now. It's not like embarrassing to be a TV star anymore, but I feel like at this time it's like, oh, he's like a TV actor. Like,
So Abby is this the best Joan Crawford movie? I think the best Joan Crawford movie is Mildred Pierce.
Oh,
the one that she won the Oscar for, because she fought tooth and nail to get that role. She did everything and beyond. She was willing to go from being like she saw herself in the role of Mildred Pierce because of always having to prove herself, come from like a rags to riches story, but for someone who's a lot older, because that's kind of the whole point. Trying to please her spoiled brat of a daughter. But I guess for me, it would be whatever happened to, it would be Mildred Pierce, whatever happened to Baby Jane, and then maybe Grand Hotel, because she was in that film with the Barrymores and Greta Garbo. It was a good ensemble movie from like 1932.
You know what's interesting, talking about like May December, when we talked about that, Todd Haynes, who directed and was like the person that put out May December last year, he did Mildred Pierce as like a limited HBO series, with
Kate Winslet and Evan Rachel Wood, which by the way was a lot more accurate to the book. Oh, you're in it?
I'm in that. Yeah, I'm a jogger.
Oh. What? Yeah.
I had no idea.
The hair isn't pink, so you would never know.
No. What's so funny about the book compared to like the miniseries and the movie is that the book is more about Mildred's sexual obsession with Vita. And I think the miniseries, if I remember, also made a note of that too, because they just had to tone it down and make it a mystery film noir for the 40s. They couldn't do like, oh, she's kind of like obsessed in a sexual needing type of way of her own daughter. We can't do that. Let's just make it a mystery noir film instead.
Yeah.
Because Be Kind Rewind had a whole shout out to Be Kind Rewind, old Hollywood YouTube channel. Love them. They've done 2 movies about whatever happened to Baby Jane. They did one about Mildred Pierce, breaking down like the real context of the novel compared to the movie. Really good.
I will say, I don't necessarily like the whole trend of like, oh, something's good, let's remake it as a second adaptation. I do like when they have a movie that they make and then they turn it into like a mini series or like do something in a different format with it. I like when they do that. More than I like.
On it.
Oh, there's a movie that I like. It's adapted from a book. Let's make a different adaptation of it. It's like people already did that. Like, why not try something new?
Yeah. That's why I remember the one thing about the Mildred Pierce miniseries with Kate Winslet and Evan Rachel Wood is that it showed more of like what the novel was more about.
That's what you remember most about it.
Yes, I remember this jogger who was like, I was like, that jogger and I are going to be friends one day.
Right.
Oh God.
Like, one day I'll.
Did you remember? Do you remember how it was set in Maine in the summer, but it was Massachusetts in the dead of winter?
Oh,
because I remember.
That's why I wonder too, what was it like being an extra on the beach for whatever happened to Baby Jane? Because a lot of these young folks maybe don't know who Davis and Crawford were. Like, did they realize they were on the beach doing a scene with two legends? I would be like, oh my god, Miss Davis, Miss Crawford.
I heard a fantastic alleged about that scene. Bette Davis says that Joan Crawford was wearing false breasts in
Oh my
the
god,
beach scenes.
so
She was
because she was
stuffing
laying
her
like that.
Yeah, and she was like, nobody's boobs look like that when you lie down. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, because they flat, even as big as my boobs are, they kind of flatten out, obviously, because that's what they do. They move backwards, like
because gravity, it's the law.
Yes.
Not for Joan Crawford, it's not.
No, the rules don't apply to Joan Crawford, is what we learned tonight, folks.
Dream Job Beach.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by the fact, because I've seen like the end of this movie before this, and I've seen like a bunch of this. Like I've obviously seen, but Blanche, you are in that chair. Like I've seen that 1,000 times. I've seen.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't think I've ever seen the entirety of the movie, but like I've seen obviously like the bird eating and the rat eating. Like I've seen like the big scenes from this movie, right? Like they're ubiquitous. I'm fascinated by the fact that like, and I wouldn't have realized this like a long time ago seeing it, like the beach in the end of this is the same beach from Kiss Me Deadly, which is like one of my favorite movies. And the same beach house thing that blows up at the end of Kiss Me Deadly that they have like, they have the atom bomb in or whatever, and they're running away from it on the beach. That's literally the same beach house that is in the background in this. And then on top of that, like two of the random stars that they threw in, Wesley Addy and Maxine Cooper, are both from like the main characters in Kiss Me Deadly. Like
they're easy to work with, and you know that you can get that location already, so why not?
Yeah.
Well, Wesley Addy also was like, that was like Robert Aldrich's like go-to guy. Like he was like, he's in like all of his movies. Like that's the guy that he would go to and be like, because he had actors that he worked with a bunch of times. I mean, Joan Crawford after this was obviously one of them. Like, like that became like at least 2 big movies with her. But he was like one of the people that you'd put in whatever movie you made in the background.
Yeah, that's kind of like Tim Burton, Johnny Depp situation.
Yeah.
Or now it's going to be a Tim Burton, Jenna Ortega situation.
Hey, at least they're switching it up. The beach scene, though.
Have a role for my 21-year-old Latinx adopted daughter. Yeah.
and my gorgeous, talented girlfriend. No, I was going to say the beach scene. It gets compared a lot to Sunset Boulevard, and I think it's because it has that like ending, those lines at the end that just feels so like that hits so hard to cut and to end there.
And kind of ambiguous. Really awesome. Yeah, like, and also the end is kind of ambiguous. Like, does Blanche survive? We don't know. What happens to these two characters next?
In the book, no.
I'm ready for my close-up, officer. Yeah,
I'm ready for my friend, officer now.
And obviously there just aren't that many middle-aged actresses, or at least that, like, I would say like middle-aged actresses in a movie at that time period, right? Like the 50s and 60s, like. A lot of times they kind of
a lot of them retired.
They throw you off the lot and then bring you back to play like an old grandmother or something. Like a wisdom grandmother.
They need a witch for this scene,
or like just like that one old lady that's always in like the background of every like saloon or something. They're like, this is like a western.
Yeah, like another good example. Would be like, of course, Greta Garbo. She retired from acting before the 1940s because she was like, people don't like me for some reason. Norma Shear retired because the reason why she got so many roles because she was married to Irving Thalberg. And when he died, she quit acting.
By the way, we did do Sunset Boulevard. We did a 3-hour episode, like a multi-part interview episode with Joseph McBride, who wrote the book on Billy Wilder about Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, I had like 15 people on that panel too, back and forth.
Yeah, we can do it. I mean, I'd be down to do it again, of course. Like,
I love that movie.
Like one of our, yeah. It's a classic.
I'm excited for Angela Weber's movie musical remake because we all know Glenn Close is finally going to get the Oscar for that film.
It's
after being nominated how many times they're like, here you go, Glenn, it's fine.
It's always funny that like one of Trump's favorite movies is like Sunset Boulevard that he always brings up, and it's like you're a Sunset Boulevard ass character, like just like kind of like a musty old like like former Broadway obsessed like maniac like this.
He did come down on those stairs, so he's got a big stair energy.
Yeah. Oh, another great feud that's still kind of going on. Patti LuPone and Madonna, or also Patti LuPone and Angela Lloyd Webber.
Patti LuPone and just anybody. She's fantastic.
I love her. She's the girl. I can't
fight her.
Yeah.
She was
so
good in Beau is Afraid. We all talked about that, and it was like her like as like the overbearing Jewish mother character. It was like
Oh, Abby. Back in the 90s, Angela Weber made Sunset Boulevard into a musical and was promised the role of Patti LuPone. This is where the feud started. He decided Angela Weber fired her and replaced her with Glenn Close, and she's been kind of tiffed about that ever since. And then when she won a lawsuit against Angela Lloyd Webber, she built a pool and named it the Angela Lloyd Webber Memorial Pool.
She's not dead yet. Oh, but also like you traded in Patti LuPone in a musical for fucking Glenn Close. I love Glenn Close, but Patti LuPone is a singing god.
Yeah, and that's why she always will critique Madonna's performance in Evita. She's like, she has no emotion when she sings. She's very stoic and like, I'm like, yes, thank you.
Patti LuPone is one of those rare people though that's like a lot more comfortable in the world of like plays, I feel like, than like
she's
Broadway,
a big theater
like,
act.
Yes.
Rather, and you don't really get too many people like that anymore. Like,
she's the reason. Yeah, she's the first person to be like, you on your cell phone, get the fuck out of this theater. Like that's how she went viral first back in 2008.
All right, let me rephrase this. By the way, you don't really get that many people that are like a big name star that stick to like Broadway and theater, right? Like there's plenty of people I'm sure that are just theatrical actors and stuff. Like,
Bette Davis started in theater.
Yeah.
But when you look at the way that theater is put together now, the schedule for a theatrical run, there are 8 shows because you do 2 on a Wednesday. So you're doing tons, way more work compared to a film shoot where there are going to be like 16-hour days and it might be a couple of months, but it's contained. So I think a lot of people have to be really want to and really young, or maybe you're doing a prestige run for a period of time to get better movie roles later, but like it is a thankless and hard schedule. That's why not that many people who have made it go back to that kind of grueling work.
And also too is that like when it comes to theater, like soap operas, for instance, the soap opera schedule is very rigorous too. I mean, very few people make it outside of soap operas. A good example is Nicholas Chavez, who played Spencer Cassadine on General Hospital. He won the Daytime Emmy for Best like Younger Actor, and now Ryan Murphy's got him as a lead in the Menendez miniseries, and then like a guest star on a show of his. Like he's gonna be a big sensation. I mean, he's got the looks, he's got the talent.
He's a Nepo baby. His
Hugo
dad,
Chavez.
I was gonna say his dad was president of Venezuela.
Well, with the daytime soap actors, they're given copy sometimes minutes before they shoot. Those actors can learn a script so well, so quickly that more of them should be given consideration. In my opinion, they work very hard. And
back in the day, a lot of them had the free cue cards. Speaking of, tying it back to Joan Crawford, Kristina was on a soap opera called like something about some storm or whatever, and she had an ovarian cyst that burst. So Joan Crawford was like, I can fill it for my 28-year-old daughter. I'll do it. And they let her do it. And she was drunk. She was misreading the lines. She was like, put the cue cards up. She was like, like kept looking at the cue cards, like looking frustrated. And it was so bad that they actually they removed Kristina's character from the show because of how bad Joan was.
Oh, bless.
Yeah. And I think that's another reason why she wrote the book too, because Kristina expected Joan Crawford to hand her movie roles, which was not the truth. Joan Crawford's like, you want to be a film star, you have to work your way through like I did.
Don't drink me at a daytime television though. Like you don't have to give me a job. Just don't make me lose the one I fucking have.
Yeah.
That's like such a sad state. I feel like also like getting drank out of daytime television. It's like,
Yeah.
oh man, like half the people
Yeah.
watching this are drunk at any given afternoon. You know what I mean? Like 90% of the people watching soap operas are probably, they've had a couple. Like,
Yeah. I mean, y'all, if you want to watch the Gothic soap opera Dark Shadows, every Saturday starting at 12 noon Eastern, we start watching it, and I always leave off on a good cliffhanger too. And I love watching the people fumble their lines too, because you can tell who's acting like very stoically, and like who's like the older actors are like stoically acting and reading from a cue card, but then other ones like, oh well, I've done it. It's just so funny just seeing like the generational divide between the older actors and the younger actors. And that's another thing too with whatever happened to Baby Jane, is that you can tell, Joan Crawford is still doing like that transatlantic accent that she was trained to learn when she went to talkies, and Bette Davis is just whatever.
But then you also making fun of the fucking transatlantic accent.
Yes.
And just savaging her with it, where she's
so
like,
calm, cool, collected. Yes.
And even just the amount of their face that they're both willing to use. Like Crawford is giving us like, I'm hurt but beautiful, and Bette Davis is like giving us the whole every single muscle in there.
Yeah.
And the different levels of shots that we can get, because it's not
and same with like Anna Lee as the nosy neighbor, and then BD as like the daughter who clearly just can't act and has like a regular smuggler accent with a deep voice, because that's actually how she talks in real life. Like she's got this voice that's very deep and very annoying.
Should also shout out,
sorry, BD.
Not sorry, you're awful.
The actors Maddie Norman that plays Elvira, like I always think of like the vampire Elvira. But like,
happy birthday, by the way, it's her birthday today.
Her
damn
performance in this is really great.
Yeah.
And there's also just such a sadness, number one, to the fact that like a woman of color at this time period, like it's still the early 60s, but like
gets killed off in such a way.
Yeah, but also like
looking out for the white woman.
Yeah, but it's also understandable why she's seen in this culture in America as so disposable, almost, right? Like almost like an afterthought or something like that, or at least that's what Baby Jane figures she's going to be if she murders her and just kind of hides like she just leaves the body in the street.
Who would look for the body? Who cares?
Yeah, and like in that moment, like there's just such a power differentiation between like even just like a woman that's doing housekeeping that's a woman of color, like, and like a Hollywood star, even like an alcoholic, like a white woman that's been in Hollywood movies, like a severely alcoholic one. And then there's also a power differentiation, not just because she's in a chair, but like between the two sisters. The other sister, because she's mobile and because she's able to get to the door and because she's able to speak on behalf of her sister, like every time it's clearly like a situation that's a red flag nobody thinks to really go into. And on one hand, it's sad because they're middle-aged women that are living alone and nobody really wants to intrude into that situation, so she's able to get away with more. But also at the same time, like the fact that Blanche can't get to the, I mean, and she kind of deserves it because she snapped her own spine, but like the fact that she can't get down to the door, like Baby Jane already has like a no pun intended leg up on her by a lot.
Takes the phone, takes the buzzer away too. And she also tells everyone who wants to visit her, like, yeah, but my sister's not fit for visitors. I'm like, just because she's the wheelchair, that's ableist.
So you should just cancel Baby Jane.
You're so right, though. She takes advantage of the fact that everyone in society is saying, you're so ugly and so old, we don't want to look at you anymore, to get away with a ton of shit because she knows no one's looking. As much as she would like them to.
You don't know who she is, because the running gag is she's like, when she tells Emmett, she's like, I'm Baby Jane Hudson. He's like,
and that's such a sad thing. Like, number one, it's sad because her name is Baby Jane, and she's like an older woman being like, I'm Baby Jane, and everyone's like, sure you are, Jane. But like, but also just like the fact that she's still trying to coast off this child star thing, and like
from the 1910s, no less, and it's 1962.
So do you feel like it's her fault for the way that she is, Or do you feel like she's a product of the way that her dad made her, or that even just that Blanche is the one to blame? Do you feel like no one's the one to blame, or everyone's the one to blame?
Yeah,
Like,
I was gonna say
Everyone.
all of the above.
Everyone. Yeah, everyone's to
Yeah.
blame. I mean, like, because her dad spoiled her. She was always spoiled and entitled. That kindly grew into adulthood to the point where she was mocking her famous sister at a party, and her sister was like, "You know what? I'm gonna cripple you." But then, of course, she moved away from the car too quick, and so she ended up snapping her own spine instead. So
there's like a kind of person that's like extremely weirdly lucky that like shouldn't be. Like the perfect example is Jane running away from the car just in the nick of time, and then like if they're like having her spine broken or whatever. Like there's a certain kind of person you're like, I wouldn't want to be, but like there is some kind of luck to it almost. Like she gets away with a lot until she doesn't.
Yeah. And it's great. Katie, you go.
I was just going to ask one more question about the cinematography, because I had heard that there was a period of time where they wanted to do this film in color.
Yep.
And you can see some colorized shots. Some people on YouTube have done a couple of scenes in color.
Like the one behind
I have an opinion. Yeah, there's one right there right now. What do you guys think? Is this a film that can be colorized, or do you feel like that choice is part of it?
It can, but it shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's like trying to colorize silent films. Like, unless you want to do one scene that should be Technicolor, like the Phantom of the Opera's masquerade ball scene, that's it.
I mean, there's the phrase like chiaroscuro, like I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, but like there's that phrase which is like the black and white when it's the amount of shadow on one side, and then with the black and white, like that doesn't translate very well into color at all. And I think that in this movie on multiple occasions there's some really beautiful use of that I don't think translates. But I also don't think everything needs to be in color. Like well, I don't see color personally, but no, like
not even your own, by the way.
I think it's so funny that Kristina chose to go with like we asked ourselves if we could before we should on this, like Jurassic Park. I think it's interesting because normally it doesn't really matter. It's more of a period piece, like either they chose to or they didn't. And I feel like with this film, if you didn't choose to, you wouldn't have the evocative feeling of like a Hitchcock film, feeling of the period that they're coming out of, that is breaking into this new Hollywood right now. So like, it's important. I don't know.
They're still stuck in like a black and white world inside of that house. Like plastic golden.
There's no reason to make it in color because there's literally no color in their lives.
Yes. Ooh. I like both those answers.
I also think that the insane amount of I mean you can see it in the picture, like the insane amount of makeup that Bette Davis puts on looks, I mean not good, it looks terrifying,
better.
But like it looks it works in black and white. I do not think that it works in color. If you're like, oh look, this woman is like a really caked up face, and it's like
and if you notice too, like, and I learned about this with black and white films, if you wonder why the red lipstick looks completely black, it's because of the tone of lipstick. You have to wear like green lipstick for it to actually not be as like noticeable red. If you're wearing a dark red lipstick, it's gonna look black.
Yeah, well, because it is. I mean, it is pretty close to black as is, right? Like it's a dark, like if you take away the color from it. I had one other thing to say. I
remember this from a YouTuber and TikToker and Instagrammer that I follow. She's pretty great.
There's some great color theory explanations on that. You do the blue and blue on the cheeks as well, and then red for your eyeliner will pop really well as well.
Yep, that's right.
Some really interesting stuff.
Yep.
I think. By the way, what do you guys think about I have one more clip to play after this, but what do you guys think about like the Victor Buono, like Edwin Flagg character? That character I think is fucking great. I don't know how much he really adds. I mean, besides being like a link to the outside world that she gets to kind of bring in, and that kind of spurs her to go even more insane.
Yeah.
Especially because it's yet another person that's like manipulating her. In that way.
He's like, "Give me my money now," and she's like, "Okay." like he's like him and his mom are struggling with funds and all that, but also she's the one who tells him like, "Oh, you're working for that baby Jane Hudson, huh? Well, I heard she cripples her sister. Like, watch out for that lady."
Which Victor Buono, I think I'm pretty sure actually did live with his mother until his death. Like
he was also a closeted
He
gay
lived-
man who him and Bette Davis like clicked, like they were BFFs.
he's like kind of a fascinating character. He was in Batman as the Pharaoh.
Yeah.
He was like there's all these pictures of him in like an Egyptian pharaoh.
King Tut.
Yeah, King Tut. Yeah.
Oh, and the Adam West Batman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, he was only 43 when he died too.
Yeah, he died. He died very young.
That's sad. Oh.
Heart attack. Probably.
Yeah, he was.
weight and all that.
Yeah. But he was like kind of a sensation after this movie. Like he has a very long thing, like a very long list of credits, but they all come out of being discovered for this. But I think his like I don't know, I really got a kick out of his performative like British, like he takes his version of putting on airs is like to actually be like a British thespian type guy that's like, well, my father was in, he'd never really made it into movies, and then everyone else in this movie is, or not really, Bette Davis, yeah, because she's still trying to be like her old self. Like everybody in this movie is kind of putting on airs, and it's very funny to see someone come in from the outside and their version of like putting on airs is like, I'll be a foppish British man, like that's how I'm gonna get the money out of it.
Yeah. Also, Greay Gardens was the perfect antithesis to Baby Jane. It's so funny because I love Greay Gardens, the documentary about Jackie's cousins, and my mom had never heard of it. I'm like, you never heard of the cousins of Jackie O who live in like filth with their cats, and the house is condemned? She's like, nope. I'm like, okay.
I actually feel embarrassed that the first time I heard of Greay Gardens was the Fred Armisen
the documentary.
Yeah, when they're the women from Greay Gardens.
No, because me too. That could definitely, both of those films could be within hagsploitation. Perhaps the documentary now one just a smidge more because it goes horror, but it is a good film to bring up in this whole story that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's like, why isn't Jackie O financially supporting her cousins who were once socialites who just mismanaged their money? I'm assuming.
But also, she finally gave them the money to pay for the house after the documentary came out and embarrassed.
And they didn't even fix anything, too. I'm like, they didn't. Did they just save all that money? Like, oh my god, it was so funny. But you got to
shame them into. I have one more clip though about the eating rats thing, and then we can jump to.
Oh, good. We don't want to miss that.
Jump to Letterboxd.
This is Joan talks about eating rats. Eating rats.
Delicious.
Making might have been conveyor belted, although there's some truth in the charge that artists were manufactured, and
you manufacture toys. You don't manufacture stars. You can't turn them out. There were nowadays you see them. They're all out of the same cookie cutter. I still think we should go back to romantic pictures. The world is so angry. I'm no Cinderella, but by golly, the world is so angry that if we could get romantic pictures back again, and no angry young men, and have the young men have their hair cut, and the young ladies let it grow, I think we'd get back to a nice human relationship again.
A nice human relationship.
Yeah, does she ever not tell people exactly what she thinks?
Oh my god, that's what I loved about her. She got the real, but in a very nice, soft way. That did not seem insulting.
Her and Bette Davis both though. Like that's one of the things that's almost like the you mean we could have been friends this whole time? Like there's a lot of similarities in the way that they learned how to communicate in interviews. Oh, that guy was like giving her nothing. He was like, we manufacture stars. She just kept on going. He was like,
She got it. This interview shows how much she knows about filmmaking and like the little details that she was pointing out. I'm like, I wouldn't have paid attention to like your where your hands were positioned on the wheels of the wheelchair. Like what? And like that's a professional. This is what I was explaining earlier to everyone, that she wanted to know everything about filmmaking to perfect her craft.
Yeah.
And by golly.
That's admirable.
A lot of some actresses, and she has a point. Like she's like, times are so different now, and it's not the same as it used to when stars were, a lot of stars were manufactured. I mean, look at James Mansfield. She was supposed to be manufactured as a knockoff Marilyn Monroe. Like a lot of this, like she was kind of saying that like a lot of it ends up being the same.
Yeah. I mean, there's always trends in like the way that kind of stuff comes out. I mean, it's fascinating now with like social media as a new form of like instant feedback rather than like, you know, audience reports as like I feel like you could manufacture things in a different way at that point when Hollywood was having a one-way conversation, really. I mean, like you could write letters to like the news, but like Hollywood's having a one-way conversation with their audience. Now everything is on this two-way conversational scale. Not that you're actually talking to anybody that's, you know, on the other side, but like there's this instantaneous pouring in of feedback that you really can't sculpt the landscape for you know, like because you could even see it when directors are like trying hard to create a star out of somebody, and then every comment and like the thing underneath is like, yeah, this director just trying to push this person on us. And it's like,
or what's the term, like what is the term for like the music industry? I forgot what it's called because my mind went completely blank, but it's like, oh, you know, this person just came out of nowhere. They're like someone who was like manufactured. I gotta look at the term because it's gonna drive me nuts.
Industry plant.
Yeah, industry plant. Yeah, that's what it is. A lot of people feel like okay, some people would say Sabrina Carpenter could be considered industry plant because she's been in the music industry for years and hasn't had a hit record until recently. I'm like, no, it's just right timing, right producers, right music finally coming in.
Wasn't she on like Nickelodeon or Disney Channel?
She was on the Boy Meets World spinoff, Girl Meets World. Yeah, so she already had like an established career in acting. Some people say that Tate McRae is an industry plant but she's just trying to market herself as like a Canadian Britney Spears type because she's been in the industry for years, and or Lana Del Rey is considered an industry plant because she didn't make it as Lizzie Grant. Katy Perry too.
I'll never stop thinking about the fact that I was in like that residential placement school thing in like 2011 and 2012 when Lana Del Rey blew up, and that's like it was like in Lake Placid where Lana Del Rey is from, and there was like this older like the guy that was like one of the head people there at the school that I was like stuck at, like living at, was like Lana Del Rey. I'm friends with her parents, like Lizzie Grant. She's like, you know, and she ran away to New York City, and she drank, and her parents are scared, worried sick about her or something, and like would give that speech as like you shouldn't go down that path. And it was like right when she was blowing up, it was like none of us are ever gonna go down the path of being successful. We're in like a weird school placement.
Also too, we're trying to make Zendaya happen. Like she has a natural talent. Like she can sing, she can act. She was able to be one of the successful child stars of Disney who did it right. And the fact that we're fine with her being a drug addict in Euphoria proves that. We're not shocked that she's a former Disney star playing a heroin addict anymore who lied, cheated, and steal and did drugs. Like it's crazy. Yeah, Joan Crawford was renamed in a magazine contest, but she said you cannot manufacture a star. Well, in a weird way, you can manufacture a name, but it's what you do with the name is what matters. She made that. She became a star in the end with her talent.
Yeah, well, I mean, you see it in like, I mean, fuck politics, but you see it in politics, right? Like they try a lot of times. Establishment in any industry, right? We'll try hard to put these people out in front of you and say like, you know, everybody like this person has charisma, right? And if people don't believe that they have charisma, if they don't like whatever, you know, they don't like what they're seeing, they don't feel that star power, whether it's in a movie or whether it's on stage in like a debate stage or like whatever it is, right? Yeah. People don't feel that charisma. That person is not going to take off in the way that, you know, this like any kind of studio or established power base really wants them to. Like star power is something you either have or you don't.
Yeah. You got to have the it factor. KT.
Oh no, go ahead.
Well, with Joan Crawford, do you know who directed one of her last acting credits? A young Steven Spielberg. Night Gallery.
Oh,
God, was she was so embarrassed with that one too, because she was like, oh my God, this young dude who's like, I'm old enough to be his grandmother's directing me. Like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. But one thing he did say is that he respected the fact that she knew the craft. Like he was like, she could have directed herself in this whole episode.
Well, when you're that young, you learn from the actor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we saw the same thing with when we talked about Charlie Chaplin and we talked about The Great Dictator. And I mean, it goes also here with Robert Aldrich, but like, because he helped. He was the assistant director with Charlie Chaplin on Limelight, but like Charlie Chaplin decided that his star making thing, and people at the time of silent films like were all over this. Like their version of getting a piece of the action or whatever is like, I'm gonna learn how to direct, I'm gonna learn how to run the cameras, I'm gonna learn all of this stuff, and then kind of my own production. And that kind of stopped with the like the ability to make that jump kind of stopped with the Hollywood studio system. Like when they decided, hey, we don't want you to make the jump, you're not going to make the jump. But it opened back up with with the new Hollywood.
Yep.
Yeah, and you see that with directors like Margot Robbie right now, who's kind of pulling back because there are not enough roles for women that are good enough. So she's like, I'm going to prioritize making it from the back end before I go back out to the front end. I was going to say that
a mommy too.
Of course, well, that is also a reason why you don't see many women stick into the later parties because of that involvement.
Yep.
I was going to say I looked up her real name, Joan Crawford's real name.
Lucille Lesueur.
Yeah, Lucille Lesueur. That's a fine name. It's not like it was Engelbert Humperdinck or something. Like,
well, the thing is that of course a lot of actors in Hollywood had changed their names, but like the quote, I think it was the mayor, MGM was like, better crawfish than Lesueur, like sewer.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's why it was either going to be Joan Arden. But I'm like, nah, Joan Crawford's Arden's fine, but I just feel like Joan Crawford does sound like a famous name. Like it just does.
Yeah. You also know how to spell it when you hear it, so that's always good.
Yeah. Bette Davis, like there's so many different ways to spell her name, but her name was just her middle name's Elizabeth, her last name is Davis. So Betty was like a nickname, I guess, for because a lot of people do have nicknames for their middle names instead of their first names. So that's where Bette Davis came from.
I feel like also there's like I'm sure you felt like this later on in life with like Joan Crawford, probably like because when she got into filmmaking, obviously Lucille Ball was not like a household name or even like a well-known name or anything like that. But like I feel like after that there was only one Lucille. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
oh fuck yeah!
There was the Lucy show where Joan Crawford guest starred.
She's probably,
and they were like
really
Joan
thankful
Crawford.
that she didn't have Lucille as her like star name.
Yeah, but it's kind of cool seeing all the TV spots that Joan Crawford did in the 60s and like early 70s. Like it just showed like, oh, she was willing to, she knew TV was a medium. She went with it. Had she lived, she probably would have done good TV movies.
She was the Pepsi spokeswoman, and then she parlayed that, and then she parlayed one of her marriages into being on the Pepsi executive board.
Yep,
she got to be on that, and then which is why Bette Davis ended up buying a Coca-Cola machine for the set. But
yes, hey, Coca-Cola does taste better than Pepsi.
It does. I will vote for that.
We have Pepsi at home. We have Joan Crawford at home.
And it's a Pepsi bottle.
But Kristina, you want to lead us in the in today's prayer, in today's Letterboxd one-liners prayer?
Yes. So since Kona's not here, I'm in charge. So Letterboxd is a place where film lovers, film haters, film curious folks gather with each other to discuss the films that they loved, might not have loved, wondered. I kind of missed the ending because I was getting my ass eaten type of situation with this film. A lot of people talking about why they missed the ending in this movie. This is but oh my god, I'm so sorry. But
no, that's it's not the movie to miss the ending for, but also
but it's also,
I mean the bit makes it itself right there, right? Like you could be like, well, I don't know what happened to Baby Jane because, and then fill in the blank.
Yeah. But this is best succinctly expressed on Letterboxd. Not just the Siskel's and Eberts of the world can have their say in. Everyone can have their say. It's a bomb of democracy. So here are the Letterboxd one-liners for whatever happened to Baby Jane. I can't believe Marina and the Diamonds is still walking free to this day. It's the heart. It's that heart little tattoo. She's known for that too.
Yeah. Wonder if she got it from there.
Maybe. Because it's pre-Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, so. I bet Ivanka Trump twerks to "I've written a letter to Daddy."
I feel like this one works in multiple ways because she could be imagining her dad like dead. She's like, oh.
Yes.
My mood is Blanche spinning around in circles and screaming.
That's such a good scene too.
Yeah, that's like that's how instead of running around in circles screaming, she's like, I have no choice but to wheel myself around screaming.
It's it reminds me of the that Rugrats clip that always goes around where he's like, why are you making why are you making like whatever at like pudding at 3 a.m. and he's like, because I've lost control of my life.
Yes, and remember, these people were 34 years old, 33-year-olds. I'm like, no, in a cartoon, nah.
This is definitely like that's Blanche's like I've lost control of my life spin.
I'm making hot chocolate.
I think this scene is a very good testament to what you were saying earlier, though, Kristina. The fact that she can wheel around and give us that psychological dread in the wheelchair and not just have it be totally laughable is credit. Yeah.
Yep.
She's like, this is where I need to put my hand so I don't chip my nails.
Yeah.
It's the last thing I have. Don't take it away from me.
Well, here it is, y'all. I got my ass ate during the final act of this movie, so I don't know what even happened to Baby Jane.
So this is just softcore pornography for this person. Like this was your lead up.
They must get off on thrillers.
That's on you.
I can't imagine getting off, like even with somebody next to me, or even wanting to touch somebody at all watching this movie. Like it would drive me to the other side of the couch.
Drive me to the other side of the world.
After the first singing of Daddy to the second singing of Daddy, I must have put on like 7 layers of additional clothing. I was like, I don't want anyone to touch me. I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't even want, and I swear to God, if my dad writes, I'm
You mean my father?
Twirling around and around in a pretty white dress with strawberry ice cream at the beach is exactly how I want to finally lose all touch with reality.
Is it bad that like I kind of felt proud of her actually making up her mind to deciding strawberry ice cream? Like I thought what was going to happen is that she was going to be like, and then not know what flavor ice cream she wanted, and then either get caught by the cops in that moment, or like I don't know, like freak out on him. Like I'm kind of proud that she was able to make that choice,
and I'm proud that she remembered that strawberry was her and Blanche's favorite ice cream flavor. Good for her.
Yeah. That's a silver lining. You guys are really good at finding silver linings.
Yes, in this movie, impossible, but it is.
I'll finally get you that ice cream that you didn't want 40, 50 years ago.
Yes.
Also, it's hilarious that I believe it says yesterday, like when it goes to the present thing, right? Like it gives you like 1917, 1935, which is when Bette Davis's first movie with her name on the marquee came out, and then and then it says like either yesterday or like a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
That's like
the ending should have started the movie.
I would have said like
you were using
yeah.
Sorry.
I was said last week in a neighborhood near you. Last week in the Los Angeles greater area.
Yeah. Only Bette Davis can terrify an audience with just her eyeliner. Joan Crawford ranked, Bette Davis ranked.
That's the Bette Davis eyes, man.
It's her, like the whole makeup setup in this just like I don't know. It definitely challenged my ability to watch it in a way. Like, I mean, I would have made it through anyway, but like, there's just by the end of it, you don't like for a lot of movies, you get accustomed to like even like you get accustomed to the most grotesque things that a character has, right? Like, but my brain and my body did not get accustomed to her make like it continued to like affect me throughout the entirety of it. And I mean, maybe it's because she was putting on more and more layers. Like it was just getting worse.
Yeah.
But I think there's something really psychologically scary about the fact that this character has such a desire for you to look at her.
Yeah.
And yet she is so horrific to look at. So that is a real interesting play for the actors to put in there.
Yep.
I also just think there's something uncanny valley about like a middle-aged woman trying to dress like a little girl. Like it will never not be
Yes.
creepy. Like you could make 1,000 of these movies and it could be the biggest trope in the world and I would still be creeped out by it.
Plus, she's got Victorian creepy dolls. She's got a little like Mithrigan situation
And then
going on.
she looks like the little girl looks like the doll, and then she looks like the doll, and she kind of looks like the little girl.
The
And it's
hair,
like,
man.
And then she's looking in the mirror at herself, and then the doll is looking for the corner in the mirror, and there's it's all hitting you.
She's horrified. She's like, I'm old. Ah!
It made me. I found that fucking neighbor lady so annoying, and and Bette Davis's daughter was not good at acting. But whenever we got to like their living room, I'd be like, oh my god, I'm out of that LA mansion. Like,
yes, you need that tension. You need that release for a second to be like,
yeah.
And think Blanche never gets that release. She's in the house all the time.
Yeah,
she did that to herself.
Out of all the films that start with the title card saying 1917, this one is by far the most brutal.
Touche.
All Quiet on the Western Front works here too.
Yeah. So those are the Letterboxd one-liners. Check us out over, especially at Forrest, who logs in our shit. Conan, he's Conan Neutron, nowhere to be found right now. But he's logging in all the stuff for the Criterion collection, I'm assuming,
The
right?
way you just smiled made me imagine like you get done with the stream and then you hear like over there.
now I'm good. Conan's doing the Criterion challenge, so follow him on that while he's on tour. I'm assuming he's going to try his best to log in movies. And KT, you are movie runtime, right? At Letterboxd?
Absolutely.
I'm
Conan's anywhere. He's floating face down in Kristina's pool.
Yeah. I don't even have a pool.
Now you do. No.
I have them tied up in my mom's closet where the when the washing machine and dryer are. Anyway,
I was gonna say you have them next to the skeleton that you bring out every. It's like the skeleton's on one couch and then the Conan tied up next to it.
Very efficient for space. Sorry,
I
we're
stole
Andying you
jackets.
so bad. Let her finish the segment.
No,
Sorry.
it's fine. We're pretty much done. I logged in. Whatever happened to Baby Jane? Did a pretty good log of that. So, yeah.
I got to log All About Eve tonight.
This is how we know a movie is good. Apparently, guys, is when like a new movie is when I log it because I'm the least Letterboxd user out of the podcast.
If it moves Kristina if she is compelled to type to you that it is good, take that into consideration, viewers.
I like just being like so moved. You're like, and then you start typing on Letterboxd. It's like, wow, she was seriously moved. She went right for the phone. All right, well these are the
like a silent Bob.
These are the plugs. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And then hit the bell to get notified whenever we're streaming. And we'd humbly request that you watch the video to the end because it helps us with the algorithm and helps more film fans to discover the show. We're also monetized. If you want to get your chat questions definitely read on stream, you can always send us a super chat, which will help us keep the show going. Every cent helps. If you're watching on Twitch, you can gift us a free sub on Amazon Prime with your Prime membership. But getting subs on Twitch is always appreciated, and it helps to follow us on there as well. We also have an audio feed, which is available wherever you download podcasts, if you prefer to listen to podcasts rather than watch the stream. That's updated usually the same day we stream, but watching on YouTube and Twitch is the best way to get the show first, live as it happens. If you want to support us with a monthly donation and get access to all of our after parties forever, which go patron only after we do them, you can become a patron at patreon.com/movienightextra. Link is in the description for that. It really helps us keep the show going since we do have some expenses to make this happen. We also have a Discord community. Link is in the description for that. We sometimes watch movies we cover on there. We get into conversations about everything from film to TV shows to related podcasts. We even have a Discord channel for memes. It's really fun on there. You can find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, and Threads. You connect with us on all of those. Talk to us. We'd love to hear from you. Lastly, we recently made a TikTok at Movie Night Extra where we're putting up short form clips from the episodes. Okay, passing this to Conan so he can tell you about his music and this week's Protonic Reversal. Conan, who's on Protonic this week? Well, for Conan's thing this week, he is on tour on the West Coast. On Thursday, he's in San Francisco. On Friday, he's in San Pedro. On Saturday, he's in San Diego. On Sunday, he's in Tempe, Arizona. Hold on, gotta scroll down. Yeah, and I guess that's it for his tour right now. But yes, he's out on tour. You can go to neutronfriends.com/live and you can see where to get all the tickets and stuff like that. He'd love if anyone that's out there would come out there, I'm sure. So,
Yep.
That's what Conan's up to this week.
Nice.
KT, what do you have going on with what if I don't like it and movie runtime and everything you're doing? You're doing
a lot.
Yeah.
Which podcast am I on this week? Actually, I just did a episode of my own show, came out on the 15th, and we talked about There Will Be Blood with my friend who's a graphic designer, Brett Kelly. I chose him because, like you were saying earlier, there's this concept of chiaroscuro, where there's like this light and this dark, and he's a graphic artist who uses primarily white paint and pen. And so I said, well, let's check out this crazy Daniel Day-Lewis, Paul Thomas Anderson film. And so we break it down, talk about that, got really into the concept of even criticizing film that is older, kind of the dissection between new historicism and presentism when you're looking at something that is supposed to be a historical period piece as well as commentary on the time that it came out, but it's like 20 years old, so you're talking about it within the lens that you currently are. So, some normal nerdy ass shit. That's what's going on with me.
For sure. We still have to talk about when I'm coming on in the near future and October or whatever.
Yeah, and I got to get Kristina on as well.
Yeah,
I don't know how to make it work.
I don't know what you'll find that she hasn't seen though.
Well,
not finding a movie, but finding something she hasn't seen might be a challenge. I feel like Christina's watched every movie.
I have.
Yeah, but that's a challenge, I think. But
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating with like the chiaroscuro conversation and somebody who does like line drawing, like because I've seen definitely like when people do images that are kind of in black and white, and they definitely like I wouldn't necessarily say they're definitely like inspired by that kind of filmmaking. I always like seeing that, like especially with like comic artists and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is
like,
what Brett himself is. Yeah.
Kristina, what do you have going on this week?
Well, this past week I was on with Dan from the Web, just the two of us. We can make it if we try, for like almost 5 hours talking politics and goofing off because I couldn't stop getting rated. So I was like, "Fuck it, let's go till 2:00 in the morning. Let's go." I'm on Eastern time.
Call me a Viking because I can't stop getting rated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he also told me he had a dream about Gotham politics too. So anyway, also,
maybe
this week,
Tim Burton's next muse.
Hopefully, we're working on it. We got something cooked up. Also, today I covered some of the Trump, maybe not really, sort of not at all getting shot. JD Vance lying about the cats and dogs. Elon Musk getting visited by the feds for his tweet about Kamala and Biden not getting killed or whatever.
It's so funny he's allowed to run a social media site.
Yeah, he might. Mark Cuban wants to buy it. I'm like, you know what? Go ahead. It can't be worse than what Elon Musk is doing. I'd rather, that man's giving people affordable drugs. I'm cool with that. Like he has his own pharmacy run. It's cool. Let's do it. And then Saturday is Shadow Saturday. I left off with a cliffhanger. Liz has admitted to murdering her husband with Jason McGuire as her accomplice because she did not want to marry that son of a bitch. But she is in for a surprise about her husband's whereabouts.
Dum dum
right.
dum.
Well,
and then Sunday, Monday. Woohoo!
Find out where the husband may or may not be on Saturday.
Yes, and will Barnabas coax Victoria into being his new Josette?
Kristina, since you're the one that picked this movie, though, final thoughts. I'll throw it to you first.
Yes. So this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Really within like top 5 at this point because it's just so good. Such a classic. As a huge fan of old Hollywood, it's really nice to see that, these actors were giving another shot at being recognized for the talents that they are. I think the feud probably was played out more than what it really was, considering what Davis and Crawford have said about each other, like saying like complimenting each other's craft and talent, which is good, which is great. You love seeing that, especially with seeing the interviews of them. The cinematography is great. The writing is phenomenal. Directing is also phenomenal. I highly recommend this. If you're someone who wants to get into the Psycho-biddy hacksploitation genre, I recommend watching this first and then everything else up until like X, because X is considered that too. I think a remake of this could, if there is a remake out there, it's not good. It can't compare to this. This is a classic. This is.
The only way you can make a good remake of this is if you really found people who also have decades of hating each other.
Yeah, and I can't think of anyone right now who does that. I mean, maybe Vin Diesel and The Rock, but like
whatever happened to
take my money, take it.
Whatever happened to Fast and Furious,
or whatever happened to Baby John.
Oh my God, take my fucking money.
It's a guy version of whatever happened to Baby Jane.
Yep. There you go.
And the end of it,
yes.
At the end of it, the fucking Vin Diesel like looks at The Rock, who's like has been in a wheelchair the whole movie, and he's like, "It was me. I did it. I broke my own spine. I crippled myself." And he's like, "Oh, whatever happened to family?" I thought we were family.
We could have been friends this whole time. Just panning on his little face. Oh, come on, guys.
Let's do it. Let's greenlit it. Anyone know the agents of Vin Diesel and The Rock? We got this.
Maybe Blumhouse will make it. They make a lot of movies.
They'll just greenlight whatever it is. They're like, you know what? Yeah.
After Deliverance, I'm not sure they'd choose. I think they just make anything.
Yeah.
But KT, final thoughts?
Yeah, I as a horror director, I can't help but look at this movie as a real great thriller character study on like evil protagonists who are also the antagonists. There's a concept in this book that I won't even bother talking about. The concept is that there's a monster in every single person. It's not a yes or a no. It's just a degree to which you let it out. And I think that this is a wonderful story showing characters who are not born monsters, but are definitely shown the best ways to target and let that out of themselves, and are almost made into these horrific things that, like, as you said, Forrest, it was so beautiful that like you don't want to look at her, but you kind of have to look at her, and that in and of itself is so upsetting. It's a real great thriller. It's a classic one, up like Sunset Boulevard. I think it's one of the few earlier Hollywood films that doesn't feel like fast talking, high waisted. It really does feel like you are just watching a movie now.
Yeah, and I really like just the realization that she made Baby Jane into the monster that she was. Not that she was good before that necessarily, but like
no one's all good, Sorry.
Less destructive, I guess, less violent, less But I'm very excited for Vampire Month coming up in October. I've been like super hyped for that, especially Nosferatu. And then before that, we have the new guys, right? As our
nice guys.
Nice guys.
Yeah,
I've seen that movie.
I do like that one too.
The new guys, like, I'm new here, and they're like, you know what? Good for you. Yeah. So we have the nice guys with Zach Marsh next week, and Conan's back. So that should be good.
Yes, and Conan will tell us about his tour.
Yep. Well, we talked about keeping this to an hour and a half, and it's now 2.5 hours. So I'll let you guys. I'll let you guys go. I do love this movie though.